are and where you're from. So that open session is now available.
Hi, my name is Mark D. Whitaker. Last time I was here, I was talking about it being a good idea to change asphalt roads to cement roads and why I felt that was okay. Tonight, I'm going to tell you about another situation called mechanical biodegradation. Now, the object of mechanical biodegradation is to take landfills and turn them into dirt. Now, there are three types of dirt. There's clay, sand, and topsoil. And in order to do this, this will be a large area under consideration. The states of Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, New Mexico, and Utah would be included in a very large landfill, approximately 10 square miles. Now, I want to set aside an area near Price, probably northeast of Price. I don't really know exactly where this is going to be, but the object is to turn everything into dirt. Now, I said the states that would develop this landfall. I believe this particular situation would create about 300,000 jobs here in the state of Utah. And I believe we should hire people from all over the world. Now, there's a type of person important to this type of landfill, and that's called a picker. And that's rather a binner. Now, this binner would put things, bin them up according to their elements. And from there, they could be burned, or they, in this case, for example, a milk bottle would be melted down, then freeze dried, then separated into the various types of dirt. This is going to be a hard project to promote. I'm hopeful that I can be elected governor of the state of Utah, and that this idea I have of mine would go through, and that the people of Western US, in particular Montana, would be able to put this new landfill down. And so the idea is a good one. And I think that, I don't know what it would cost to build a landfill on top of a 3-foot deep cement slab, but that would be the object. There would be an incinerator that would burn things or melt things down, and from there make it into dust. Now, I believe the simple phrase is, from dust thou art, dust thou shalt return. And that's how this would be hopeful. I probably would be developing a website soon that people can go to, and they can ask questions about this new idea. This is the second of 2 ideas that I've had, and I appreciate being here this evening, and may God bless. Amen.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Mark. It sounds like we need to hook you up with our Wasatch Integrated Waste Management to discuss with them, because we don't do a landfill in our city. It's hired out through Layton. So
if I'm very electable as governor or not, I'm going to be ready for the office
over here.
In another situation. I don't know who's up for office though, but mine's told it's district number 18.
Okay.
In this area.
All right.
Like Centerville and Farmington and Bountiful, that type.
Thanks for coming. Thanks. We wrote down your ideas. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else for the open session? Go ahead. Just identify yourself and where you're from.
Do you mind if I take your mayor sign? It is driving me crazy. It's about to fall off.
Sure. Make it backwards. Turn it where nobody can read it, and they won't know who to be mad at.
No, we're good. It was
Okay.
just, I guess there's a little bit of OCD coming out there. My name is Tim Hare. I live in the Briarwood neighborhood, and me and some of my neighbors have come to talk with you about the road. Right. About the road project that is going on in our city, on our street. Currently, right now, it's in the process of finishing up, but our experiences have been egregious, to say the least. And we want to make sure that the city is aware of the issues that we are facing so that we can prevent this from happening to any other streets as this project continues to move forward. We understand that our utility lines are about 50 plus years old in our street. That's why they're getting repaired. We have our culinary line being replaced, our secondary water line being replaced, our gutters that are broken, our approaches that are broken being replaced, and then the entire road resurfaced. It's a very large project, and we recognize that. We recognize that when you do these kind of things, there's going to be some inconveniences. There's going to be a mess. We understand that. But I want to detail some of the problems we've had. And maybe it'd actually be better if I start with some of the good things. The first is that the first thing that came through was the secondary water line with Dual Creek. As far as crews go, I think everyone in the street will agree they were good. They were courteous. They knocked on our doors whenever they had to do work, adjacent to our properties. Whenever anything needed to be done at all, if they had to turn off water, whatever, they would let us know right away. If they had to block our driveways, they would let us know right away. We have had some issues with the water pressure. We know that Dual Creek is not your issue. We hope that you can help support us as the contractor with Dual Creek to help us get these things resolved, because so far those issues are falling on deaf ears. We've had broken manifolds, broken valves, broken water lines because the pressure is so great that things are quite literally exploding. The second crew that came through is the culinary line. They were also great. They were courteous. They told us if they had to block our road. They told us if they had to block our driveways. They let us know when water would come off or on. I think I might have been the only one on the street with the bad luck where when they connected my water line, it blew up my water line to my house and they had to replace that, which was not a fun experience, especially as at that point, my father was quite literally dying and died minutes after they got the water reconnected while I was out of town. So that was not a fun experience, but the crew themselves were great. Where I think the problem has come through was when the crew came in for resurfacing the road and fixing the damages, or sorry, doing all the concrete that needed to be done. We have had an issue with a lot of trash that was constantly left behind. We had a lot of aggression where they wouldn't let us in or out of our properties, where they wouldn't let us up and on the street, no warnings whatsoever of what was happening. At one point, about half the block had a 9-inch to 18-inch drop off from where our driveway was with no ramps to get in or out for over a week or more. People were having to walk their groceries up and down. We would ask them, can you put some dirt on while you're doing this? Some houses got the dirt ramps, others did not. We don't know why, but it was a big issue. We had issues where we have several disabled people in our neighborhood, one of which is homebound all the time. She had an ambulance that had to come get her. They couldn't get into the circle that she was at because it's completely blocked. So her family had to bring her from her house to the ambulance. She also requires weekly IVs. Those IV deliveries could not get onto our street. They were denied access every time. And her family had to walk up and down the street to the ends to be able to get her IV deliveries. We had another woman who has a disabled son in a wheelchair, who in 100 degrees when we were having this big heat wave, when there was no construction on the road, was denied access to get into the road and had to push her son up the road in his wheelchair, about a block in 100-degree weather. It was not a good experience. And whenever we talked with those crews, those concerns fell on deaf ears, or they were met with aggression. In fact, one of our neighbors had a verbal confrontation with the team when they wouldn't let them access the road. And so they moved a porta potty in front of their house for about a month. That porta potty caused my driveway to be damaged when a contractor drove on a driveway that was only 10 days old and cracked my cement and had other issues. Now I'm working with the contractor directly on that to get resolved, but it still is a part of the broader story, the broader issue. We have had many, we were assured that our 4-foot park strips that we're talking about today, we were assured that those were going to be fixed by a landscaper. The landscaper was on our properties for about a day and a half. He added dirt, he might have added some sod. In my case, He added a little bit of rock to the front that's not up to code with the city. It's granular pebble they used to fill the base with. Another house up the street, they used her gravel to fill a hole they had in the road. Many of us aren't up to snuff still yet. A lot of us have broken sprinkler pipes. I've got letters from a lot of residents in the city that we wanted to deliver to you today, along with photos. So you can see some of the things that we've been dealing with. Again, garbage everywhere, a real lack of quality. We're seeing sidewalks that are wavy, not sidewalks, sorry, curbs that are wavy. We have had cracks in the brand new sidewalks already. We've had water that when it runs on the street and it hits Briarwood Circle, it splits and part of it goes down the gutter and the rest of it goes down the middle of the road. We know that there was some failures of their work on inspections before they move on to many steps multiple times. And we just feel like perhaps the quality of work in the last contracting group was not at the snuff of where our tax dollars should be spent. We're still, again, waiting for our yards to be fixed. We're waiting for things that have been promised to come to fruition. And we just don't know at this point what's going to happen next. We do feel like we didn't have a place to go. We didn't have a good contact in the city to talk about these issues. When those of us like myself reached out to the city, we did feel like we were pushed off and said, it's not our problem. It's the contractor who did the work. We need to deal with them. But we feel like the city needed to be an advocate for us as the person who hired these companies to help us get these issues resolved. Often we felt like it was not the city's problem. Again, we feel the way with Dual Creek as well. They won't talk to us either, not our problem. And so we just feel a little bit at a loss within our street, knowing how we're gonna resolve these issues. We wanted to bring it to the council, let you know where we're at and give you an opportunity to help us figure out how to make it right and help us make sure this does not continue on other streets as this project continues throughout the city.
Thank you. Will you do me a favor, get those letters over here to Jennifer and also your name and contact information?
I will.
And as council, she can get that to us. We as staff's here as well too, so they've heard, so we can address the issue and get to the bottom of it and have a contact and be able to get back to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I know that there's a couple of people that might want to have a few words in the street. Oh, sorry.
Councilwoman Hurst has a clarifying
Just
question.
a clarifying question. When you talk about Jewel Creek, I'm assuming the pressure issues have happened since the pipeline was replaced.
100%. The pressure was completely manageable before. We actually had a lot of water that flowed through before without any problems.
Yeah, we used our watering systems until that point. July.
Okay.
And I
think it's because there's new pipes, they were clean. And
Maybe
the water
there's more
was
water
able to
flowing
rush
through.
But Bill Creek will
It
argue
might
with
be
you and they're
missing a
scripted.
pressure.
And these are not all
resistant
issues
valve.
that happened immediately the day they turned on the water. Although that first week there was a lot of bursting. We were told that it's on our side of the property line that's breaking, so it's our responsibility to fix, not theirs. But we don't know where to go from there. I personally have already spent $1,500 just in sprinkler issues. My secondary water line, I had to replace my main valve, I had to replace filters, I had to replace manifolds. I've had to replace quite a bit, and it's been about $1,500 so far. And I know I'm not the only one who's laying out a lot of my own money on this. So I'll let Vicky might have something else to say, and I don't know, Diane, if there's anything else on that. I'll gather up these letters and we'll make sure we deliver them over here.
We got
To Lisa,
Right there, Jennifer.
Jennifer.
She's our recorder. She'll get them
All right,
done.
thank you very much for your time.
So I'm
Thank
Vicki
you, Tim.
Kilsmeyer, and I have contacted Centerville City at the beginning of this project because I inherited my dad's house and it had a little mound about this big of dirt on the north side of my driveway to the corner. I'm on the corner of Benito Way and Briarwood. So they started the construction right in front of my house, which was fine. But the problem was, since that little mound of dirt can't really grow anything or be watered or anything, I asked that they cement it over because it is right at the entry of the handicap new entry now. I was told no because of ordinances. They said, well, we're not going to do that anymore if we have to dig it up because of pipes or anything. There was nothing under it. But they put something in it, and I think it was to shut me up. But it's open and they reconstructed it longer, and they're now calling it a park strip. The landscaper told me he was going to paper it over and put some pea gravel or whatever in it, and that has not been done. I too fell to deaf ears. Centerville City was on and off with me. I spoke with many members of the Centerville City, and I finally went to the councilwoman Meekum. And at the end of this, I have to say, we both sat and laughed because of all the issues that went on. But the main issues that I have about this, other than that little, so what, is that my corner was taken out 5 times. The cement was put in, it dried, and then they tore it out. The cement was put in, it dried, they tore it out. And each time I was told not to turn my water on because I didn't want water on the cement, obviously, so it could cure. I understood that. It was in our first letter. I was totally helpful with that, except after 5 times now, we're talking 3 to almost 4 weeks of my lawn not being watered, my lawn was just about ready to die. I also, in my strips, my father, since his house was my father's, he did not do anything with the strips. I have a lawn guy that comes and mows. He and I raked it. We planted seed at the beginning of the spring. As the construction started, we could see it coming up. Our plan was to plant more over the winter so that it would be thick in the spring and my strip would be pretty, you know, because I could not water all of that duck. I spent over $80 on seed. So it was totally obliviously gone. They are not replacing it. I was out there many times talking with them, seeing what they were doing. It was interesting even. There were many instances that they were very polite, very nice. You know, they would answer questions, but the things they told us have not come true. And that is the reconstruction of our yards that we worked so hard to keep Centerville City looking nice and our neighborhoods clean and beautiful. And that's been disappointing because the whole time I was told by the construction guys and the cement guys and whoever else was out there from the city that, oh, they have landscapers, they're going to come in and they're going to make it just like it was or even better. They put dirt in and I don't know if this is bluegrass, but so far the sod they've set has not reacted to water. It is totally yellow. It hasn't greened up at all. It looks really gross. I want my grass replaced. My box blew up. I had pieces all over my yard. My filter in my box broke from the water pressure. It flooded. My neighbors have a driveway between our house. It flooded it. They have a back lot. It went clear back there and flooded it. That's cooked. I immediately called Dual Creek. My neighbor came over, turned off the water, everything, and we noticed that the filter had been blown apart. Now, I had been watering 2-3 times a week before construction started, but all Dual Creek could tell me was that it was the winter thaw. I'm like, shouldn't that have happened in May? So again, we had no response from Dual Creek. I spent $350 to repair the box and the filter, which I don't think should have happened either. As the road was paved, all of us came out to assess our damages, and we're finding that we had multiple of the same water damages from our boxes, as Tim explained. I also came home, the church was right behind my house. I came walking home from church and found a huge double-loaded semi-truck that had come down Bonita Way and tried to turn the corner and could not. And the water truck that sprays the road for the dust had just sprayed. And so accumulated against the curb was mud. His tires went right down in there against the curb. And guess what happened to my corner again? Totally demolished. It was cracked, broken. Again, they had to redo my corner. Again, I had to go without water for my yard. There's a few other things in here. I've got pictures and I will turn those in also.
And what is your name again?
Vicky Kilsmeyer.
Anybody else on this matter? Or is that it?
Yeah, one more, please. John West, I live in Briarwood Circle on Briarwood. I'd probably echo the first two crews we had. I hope they've been paid. They're great. They did a good job. They were respectful. They worked well with the citizens on that street. Really seems like the problems are with this third crew. Does the city council know if we paid the crew and the company to do this work? Sorry, that's a question.
I would have to investigate,
Okay.
see what that status is.
I strongly recommend, if you have not, that you don't until these matters are resolved. I actually have a little bit of an opposite portion on my end. When that crew came in, they damaged the secondary lines that got put in. I have the opposite problem. I do not have water pressure at my home now. And so we are now using our house water to, we just have gardens. We don't really have lawns, so we use that to water, so we don't lose our vegetation that we put in this year and the vegetables that we eat as a family. And so we're kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum there. Just this third crew, we'd like to see and understand if there's something that the city can do on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anybody else on this matter? I will say this, I will say that you're probably all aware that of these bigger projects we do subcontract on. We want to make sure we don't use subcontractors a second time if they're not doing their job. We have a fabulous public works department, fabulous public works director, fabulous streets crew, a water crew. They really are very, very committed to their jobs and do a wonderful job. But we will discuss it and we'll see where the problems are. We thank for you bringing that up, and we will get back to you. But so we want to make sure that we use people that are doing their job, because obviously we don't have a big enough crew to do the jobs, the large jobs like that ourselves. We have to subcontract out. So thank you. Anybody else on the open session on any other matter besides the Parkstrips? Come on up, identify yourself. Thank you.
The mayor and council. My name is Dave Vincent, and I sent an email to the council a couple of days ago. I think some of you may have received it, because I think we had a visitor that came out to our residence at 289 East Balsam Drive. Appreciate that effort that was made, whoever that was. You want to identify yourself, who that was? Somebody came out.
I was there last night.
That was you. Thanks for coming out. I'll be brief since I sent the email, but although I'm not going to comment on the code for the trees on the park strips, perhaps what I say might have a bearing on what happens in the future. And for individuals like our kids who are going to be residents of Centerville in that home for a long time. So we own that home at 289 Balsam Drive. We took possession of it in the middle of May last year. And the road work on Linda Loma, east to west, started a short time after that. On my email, I sent some pictures, and I'd like to, if I may approach, I'm going to give you a couple other pictures that you can look at before the construction started. And after, two large locust trees that were quite mature were removed, partially removed from the park strip on the south side of the home on Linda Loma. And when I saw the construction crew begin to do this, I was concerned at what the aftermath might be because of the size of the trees. The trees had gone underneath the sidewalk, the roots lifted up the sidewalk, which were replaced. And you can see on one of the photos where the sidewalk was first replaced and the large roots removed. So after a period of a few weeks, I began to be concerned because the crew that tore the tree down didn't come back and finish the job. And there was a large portion of the largest tree that was sticking above ground. And basically everybody forgot about it and did all the work around it. And I said to the contractor at the time, I said, you realize they're going to put fiber optic in here and Xfinity is going to put a line in here. And if these aren't removed, how are we going to, how are we going to deal with this in the future? Excuse me, in the future. So on the 3rd of June, I called Mark Marchant at the city, and I'd like to play for the council his voicemail that he left me. But I would like to say, I'm not here to dish on anybody. I'm not after anybody's neck or anything of that nature. But I called because of my concern, and he did field my call, and he did come out and pay a visit to the home, and I was very impressed with that. So I want to let you know that, who are part of the city. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. Does this work?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
Hey Dave, Mark Marchant, Centerville Street Department, returning your call. Went and took a look at those trees. We'll get somebody over there to get those stumps ground, get that taken care of so them trees aren't growing up like that. If you have any questions, give me a call back, 801-292-8232.
Needless to say, the damages, the trees are still there. Now they've placed the line. We would like to do our job as citizens and fix the park strip and redo it and make it look beautiful. But I don't know how to go about doing that because it's going to need a backhoe, and you've got fiber optic, you've got Xfinity, and I'm not touching any of those stumps or roots. And you can see from the picture, they're far above the ground. And now we've got trees growing everywhere. And you saw that, Council Member Heyman, when you came over. And so I'm not here to be angry. I just want a solution. And I expected when I made the phone call to Mark that it would be handled and taken care of, as he said it would be in the message. I do know that they tried to come out and poison, which did not work because of the fact that the trees were never removed properly. And the sad part about it is it would have taken one scoop from the guy on the backhoe, one scoop to remove the stump and all the roots that were growing out underneath the road. And I couldn't get him to do it. And now we're left with this issue that's going to be expensive to fix and repair. And so we're looking for a solution so that we can beautify our home and we don't feel like that we should bear the cost of that, even though I understand that we are in charge of that. I think that, oversight was poor, communication was poor. And I can see, when you do these big projects, there's challenges. I get that. But, we've got kids living there now and they can't afford to go and rip these, stumps and roots out and so forth. But we'd like to do it, but we need a solution. And so, thank you.
Are you the homeowner?
Yes.
Okay, and this
For
is
now.
the old
When
Hadley
interest
home.
rates come down, I won't be.
This is the old Hadley home
It is.
across from Taylor's.
John and Marge Hadley are my in-laws.
Okay,
And Rhonda is my wife.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks.
If I could just have one more minute, I would just like to add something to this gentleman's story. So 2 to 3 years ago, keep in mind that Paulson is 1 street away from Briarwood. I actually had 2 trees removed by the city. Those trees, the stumping company that was contracted by the city to remove my stumps did the same thing that happened over here as well. And when they came back, the only thing they did was bring it down to ground level. They did not stump out where the root system was. And during this project on our street, I tried to widen my approach so I could have a double wide approach to match my new driveway I just poured. And I could not do that because the stump was there. And the city told me that they would not remove the stump. It was my responsibility to remove it. It was the city who had removed that tree and did not finish the job of removing the stump. So I just wanted to say that this incident that you are describing here is not isolated, that the removal of the trees, removing the stumps should be part of that process.
Thanks, Tim. Any other in the anyone else for the open session? All right, thank you everyone that commented.
Mayor, one
We've
more.
got somebody coming.
Oh, come on up.
Thank you. I'll be extremely brief. My name is Michael Lambert. I am from Layton, actually, and I am here to introduce myself to you, Mayor, and the council members and the residents here as the unaffiliated bipartisan candidate running for county commission. I know you have a busy night. I'll be a minute or less, but I live, as mentioned, Layton. Part of why I'm getting involved is I've been concerned about the increasing divisiveness and polarization in politics, and that's part of why I'm running as an unaffiliated candidate. Professionally, I have background as a social worker. I've worked with young people and families throughout my career. I'm involved with co-chairing our local school community council, care about mental health, issues impacting children, our aging adult population, as well as conservation, our air quality, Great Salt Lake. So anyway, we have a lot going on, but I look forward to interacting with more of you. I've been to a number of city council meetings, and this is the most well-attended I've seen so far. But thank you for your time.
Hey, Michael, and thank you for running and being involved.
Appreciate that.
We like to get issues that bring people to City Hall, so that's what you taught us on tonight.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for throwing your hat in the ring.
Appreciate that.
Anyone else? All right, let's move on from the open session, and we will go to the business item section of our meeting. Okay, the first item is the public hearing regarding the Centerville Municipal Code Amendment with Parkstrips, street trees, sidewalk replacement program with public utility easements ordinance amendments. This was first brought up, first discussed at council meeting 2 weeks ago. Council decided to table it until this week for vote. So if we could, maybe just a little background. Is there anybody, Mark or Lisa, do you guys want to give a brief background of what's been going on with the program over the last 3-4 years, and we'll fill in as council and mayor as well too. So thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. All these people came out for me.
Yeah.
So like you mentioned, we've asked for a text amendment to the Parkstrip ordinance to remove trees from a 4-foot park strip. Over the last few years, we've kind of evolved a program to remove the trees from the park strip on a voluntary basis. Everything's voluntary except for on our road projects. And on our road projects, we have removed all of the trees from the park strips as we go through and do the construction. We implemented a voucher program in 2023, which would have been the second year we done the tree removal on the road projects. In 2023, we had 7 letters that went out to residents. 5 of those residents requested tree vouchers. Only 9 of the trees were replaced. We removed 19 off of the road.
Mark, which street was this?
This was on Deerfield Drive.
Okay.
In 2024, this year, we had Briarwood Drive, we had 1250 North that were projects, And there were 16 trees removed. We've had a few vouchers requested yet so far, but nothing has been reimbursed. We'd like to continue to push that voucher program and have a volunteer program for the tree removal. All trees that are in the park strip now, we're not looking to remove all the trees in the park strip now. We need to be methodical. We need to be thoughtful about how we go about removing the trees from the park strip. There are some areas that we have some ADA concerns that need to be looked at. We have to take into consideration that the sidewalks are for all and everybody needs to be able to use them and have them passable. So with that, is there any questions, comments, thoughts that we?
When you go in and do the saw cutting to, to level out the sidewalk before, this is not when the street's under construction, but just leveling it to repair the displacement, what is the average cost of that? Any idea?
It's been a couple of years since we've done any cutting.
Okay,
It's a couple dollars a foot.
okay. And how many feet would you normally say you're cutting?
We would average $40,000 in cutting a year, so quite a few.
Okay, and any idea on how many?
I could pull up the data and get it to you.
Okay. Also, what is the cost to replace when you do have a displacement that can no longer be saw cut? I'm assuming you're replacing at least 2 panels.
Yeah,
What's the average cost to replace those panels?
this year's pricing came in at about $12 a square foot,
Okay, so what's a panel?
4x4,
4x4, so 16 square feet times
12.
12.
Times 2.
16 times 12 times 2, so about $400 to replace it, entirely replace it. Okay.
Is that concrete alone or is that the base and everything?
That's
The
base and
labor?
everything.
Yeah.
That covers
Yeah.
everything. 4 inches thick. I'm
Correct.
assuming. Okay. Thank you.
So I want everyone that here to know that this is a matter that we don't take lightly. I was elected in 2017 and started my term in January 2018, so it's been a little over 6 years. We've been budgeting $100,000 a year in the city to replace sidewalks, take out trees for those that want it to be done. As Mark said, it's been voluntarily. It is a fact that they do cause extensive damage. You could see with sidewalks as you go around our city, you can see the painted sidewalks. It does damage to utilities underneath as well too. With that said, the council in 2018 formed a tree board, and one of the reasons we formed a tree board is because we were looking to find trees that would work in our city for winds or park strips, and obviously with larger park strips, the park strips that are 6 feet wide or more, it's easier to put a tree in those park strips. The 4-foot park strips, it gets more difficult. The tree board did a fabulous job. They were tasked with a tough job. They came up with some trees that could work in park strips and wind, but there's no perfect tree that works in a park strip. And the thing is can residents put the right tree in a park strip as well too, because you run down to your box stores and they're selling trees that shouldn't even be sold in our area because they're bringing in the cheapest tree that they can sell to you. And and we don't have a way to police everything of what's going in. So it is a complicated matter. I, as mayor, was behind that, forming that tree board to try and find solutions to it. But it's been an expensive proposition, and we've been allocating, like I said, $100,000 a year to fix the sidewalks and utilities and take out trees. I think every year since I've been there. So that's a little background from the history since I've been there of what we tried to do. So any other questions for Mark? There's a lot of people here. I do want to open this up to comments, those that want to make any. But is there any questions for Mark?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Okay, so we will open this up as I promised at the start of the meeting at the open session to comments on this. This is a public hearing related to Centerview the Municipal Code Amendment, park strips, trees, sidewalk replacement program, public utility easements, and we would just ask that you state your name and where you're from, and try and keep your comments to a couple minutes if you would, so we can allow those that want to speak to get their message out. So come.
One question before you get started. And you've done this already, but so what is being proposed exactly? A lot of us don't really know. Are you saying this is mandatory?
We'll have that discussion at the end of the public hearing. This public hearing here is actually a consideration to allow so many new faces that are here this time. We did a public hearing 2 weeks ago as well too.
Okay.
So council cares what the residents think. They care what staff thinks. We want to hear, so we can make a determination.
Yeah, I didn't know what the proposal was.
We could talk about the ordinance.
Why don't we have Lisa?
Lisa, our city attorney, can talk about the ordinance. Is what's being proposed. Did you hear his questions that he had?
Did you want to get his name? No.
Yeah, do you want to give us your name?
Don Olson.
Okay.
So essentially, the city's been working on this probably since 2018. What's proposed today is an ordinance amending our park strip ordinance to prohibit trees and park strips that are less than 6 feet wide. So trees need a certain amount of space to grow. And so if you have a 6 foot wide park strip, like we have on Parish Lane, Florentine Towns, maybe along Frontage Road, those areas can still have trees in the park strips, but a 4 foot park strip, the trees would be prohibited. We say 4 foot park strip because 95% of our park strips in Centerville are 4 feet. But there are some areas that have 6 feet or greater, but the recommendation from the tree board was, if you're going to adopt this, allow trees in park strips that are 6 feet or greater. The ordinance also proposes to codify our sidewalk replacement program, which our street supervisor, Mark Marchant, talked about, where when we go in and expend public funds on sidewalks, or street projects, we're going to take the trees out in that area. So the idea is not, and it does have some intent language in the ordinance, that by adopting this ordinance, Centerville is not going to go out and take out the trees in the park strip all at once. We're going to do it as we go around and do our streets projects, and maybe also in those areas that we've identified. You know, sometimes we have park strips or sidewalks that are displaced up of 4 inches, and they are dangerous situations. And so before we replace those sidewalks, we need to take the trees out. Otherwise, we'd be out there replacing the concrete over and over. But the sidewalk program is to take those trees out along with the streets project. And as Mark mentioned, we're taking about 20 trees a year in, you know, at least what we've been doing. Now, maybe we have more funding in the future for streets projects, and but really that's the funding now, and then any other projects that would need to be done with the sidewalk. And then the third ordinance that we're adopting is a new section of our code regarding public utility easements. We mentioned public utility easements in a number of areas of our code, but we wanted to specify those public utility easements. Originally, the ordinance proposed to prevent trees in the public utility easements as well. Most lots in Centerville have a 10-foot public utility easement in your front yard, and then 2 7-foot utility easements on either the 2 sides or the rear. So every lot, every residential lot in Centerville is supposed to have 3 public utility easements. But the tree board recommended, and I think it was with good reason, to not tackle preventing trees in the park strips, because in a lot of those side yard park strips or the rear or the public utilities in the rear yard and side public utilities, sometimes there's no utilities at all. So we thought, let's just deal with the park strips. That was the main purpose of that staff's been recommending for many years. I think the public comment that we had in our public comment section summarizes why we need to do this. And the question is, who should pay for that? Who should pay for that tree? Is it public funds for that private tree in our public property that causes all that damage and then is very costly to remove? And so we're trying to take a more proactive approach from a financial perspective to avoid these problems in the future, which I think, again, was our opening comment. We're trying to look into the future and place those trees back of sidewalk. So that's the proposal, 3 ordinance amendments, but essentially the key is that trees would not be allowed in our 4-foot park strips, but the city is not going to go out wholesale and remove trees. We're probably only taking out 20 to 30 trees a year as we do these projects.
Thank you. Does that give you a better background? Okay, so
Okay, we have a,
Okay,
sorry, just point of order. So if we
Yeah.
can have our public hearing.
we have a public hearing now. That public hearing is open. And like I say, identify yourself, where you're from. Try and keep your comments to a couple minutes.
Absolutely. Dan Chambers. I live 118 East, 1975 South. My wife was on the tree board for a couple of years, Joy Chambers. This is a complex issue. I see it. I see there's a struggle to figure out the best solution. My concern with the proposed amendment is it goes to the extreme one side of it and gives, I can accept don't plant trees in the park strip, like to control the future, to make the future better. But I don't understand removing trees from park strips where there is no issue. I think there's homeowners where you go into, they're going to say, great, take that out. Thank you. Right. Because there's a cost associated with it that they would love to not bear and have the city take care of. But that's the piece for me that seems unaddressed, is that there are situations where there's trees in the park strip and there's no issue now. Right. There could be an issue in the future. I understand that. But that to me feels like balance, not like all or nothing. Like, OK, so at this point, we're going to say fully, the city can come when that time comes, whenever it is. If we're doing your street, we're tearing out your park strip and your trees, regardless of if there's an issue. And to me, that there should be room in that to say, is there an issue? And if there's not today, and I realize like, hey, we're investing money, we're doing that street work now, we want to try to, in all one fell swoop, take care of it. So that's why it's complex. But I feel like it has to be considered. These are homeowners. If I had a beautiful park strip and there's people in my neighborhood that do, that's well maintained, and they do have, and I think the right types of trees in their park strip, I would be very frustrated that the city could just do that because they're improving the street. So my feeling is there has to be a better middle ground. There has to be a win-win. This feels like win for the city, loss for the person who wants to keep their trees. And again, it's complex. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't like a solution like this that feels like we're going to give them permission to do this regardless of the homeowner. So that would be my concern. I would love more discussion on this. I would love there to find a solution that lets, if it is in a good place, that they would have an option to say, hey, some homes we'll bear liability, something, so they could keep their trees. That's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next, is anyone else? Come on up.
My name is Scott Gillespie. I live 289 East, 1900 North. I happen to have 4 trees in the park strip. The home is roughly 35 years old. The trees are probably about the same age. I'd like to say, number one, trees are not trees, and I hope you understand the tree board probably has identified that. I mean, these aren't giant sycamore trees that are heaving the concrete. I have no issue whatsoever with the sidewalk upheaval. It seems backwards to me where this Centerville City wants to go with trees, whereas Salt Lake City is fighting to keep their trees alive. They've lost 78 some odd trees along North Temple due to some errant tree poisoning that's happened. It's a big deal with the city on how they're going to replace those trees. I mean, it's an old urban concept to keep the sidewalks cool, provide a beautification to the streets, to the city. I mean, to have a concrete jungle or asphalt jungle along the streets, I think is just not really, personally, not where I'd want to move. Okay. I'd like to also say that the city is not paying this money for the concrete. The taxpayers are paying it, understanding that the city has a responsibility to the taxpayers to manage the funds. But I think there's other ways to manage this situation other than carte blanche say we're going to remove the trees. I mean, if a homeowner wants to take responsibility for the concrete or whatever financially, maybe that's an option, or identify, I think what you've already tried to do, identify trees that are in and out, but it's become too complicated. But yeah, I would be really, really mad if you came along and said, I'm going to remove your trees. I want to say there's an elderly gentleman who takes his walker around the block, and I know he stops underneath my trees to cool off in the summertime. He really, I think, appreciates that place of shade along 300 East there. So again, I'd like the city maybe to put some leniency and whatever, the final decision is, or whatever final amendments to what you're doing.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
You have my name. I live in Hidden Acres, which is
Sorry,
an
can you
HOA.
just restate your name one more time for the record?
Don Olsen, Olsen. Just thinking about it, I agree with the last fellow that spoke. A concern about the beautification of the city. There is beauty in tree-lined streets. There's no question about it. I understand what you're getting at, but to have the end goal of removing trees in all 4-foot parking strips, to me, is too much. There are different trees that do not heave, that are small trees. It seems to me, and your tree group probably discussed this and never were able to come to anything on it, but there are trees that will not heave, that are small trees. It seems to me there could be a list of those kinds of things provided for those to replace if they want to. What is considered tree? What are shrubs, trees in your definition? Are they a single stem plant? Are they multiple stem? Are they a certain height? I've seen some areas that have used small shrubs and it's beautified too. So my concern is that you're really going all one direction. I would like to see some flexibility in there for someone who wants to plant a smaller tree and take care of it. I know we have trees in the parking strip in Hidden Acres, and they're a small tree. There's a particular variety. They're a maple, but they're made to be more columnar and light and small and compact. So anyway, that's my suggestion, is that maybe there be an option for them to select from a list of trees. I would be willing to sit on a committee, I guess, to help identify what kinds of trees, the species or subspecies. Okay, that's about all I can say. Please don't
Thanks, Don.
take our trees. Yes.
Thank you. But yeah, go ahead.
So I'm Colton Gines. I live at 20 Bonita Way. I live on the corner of Main Street and Bonita. I'm a relatively new homeowner compared to most of the people here, I think. I purchased the home in 2018 from my grandparents who lived there for 30 plus years. Since living there in the new home, I participated in the Flip the Strip program, where I've removed all the grass from my parking strip and replaced it with gravel. I've removed the sprinklers out of there and put in a drip system. Part of that program, they encouraged us to put in trees and put in drought tolerant plants. So that is what I did. I put in some trees and I went on to, I believe it was the city's website, where they had a list of trees that they did recommend for a 48-inch Parkstrip, which is what I have. And I put in the recommended trees. None of my trees are over 20 feet, 25 feet tall. They're a very small tree, and I've worked very hard to keep those trees alive. We do have a very bad boar problem in our neighborhood, so I have lost 2 of the trees, but I have replaced those. I have 4 trees in that Parkstrip right now, and I've just put a lot of work and effort into keeping those trees alive, and I do believe it adds a lot to our house. So I think, just like everybody has been saying, is I think it would be nice to have kind of a middle ground where we can meet, where smaller trees that have been put in recently that do kind of meet the standard that was set beforehand can stay in there if we choose to, because I would definitely be very sad and upset if I had to lose those trees. So, thank you.
Colton, thank you. And I want to give you a high five because you actually went to our website, what the tree board did, and working hard to come up with trees that were suggested, and you looked at that. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Next.
Most of my writing. My name is Steve Blackham. I'm a retired general contractor. I'm concerned about this ordinance for a lot of reasons. First of all, I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. I understand the cost of concrete. I understand, but I also look at the value of what it's trees give to a community. But the main thing I'm interested in is what our future is what Ms. Hyman, excuse me, brought out, is that, we can't look backwards, we gotta look forwards. And what forwards we're looking at is pretty grim. I don't want to get into the politics of it, but does this community have any type of a program to mitigate what's going to happen in the way of climate change? I think we're looking at the wrong issues here. We should be looking at issues of how we protect ourselves from climate change, from the heat that's going to be coming from the changes in the environment.
We can discuss that, but that was for the open session. We're discussing trees in the park strips right now.
Well, trees are a very big part of that, as you can see from the first part of that. I spent some time going through not the city's, Centerville City's website, but all of the other cities in the state, using artificial intelligence to have them pick out who has an ordinance like this. I couldn't find it. In fact, what I did see was that most cities, if they're not mandating park trees, they're at least encouraging. I think you need to take a real big look at this situation, the whole situation, not the dollars and cents of it. I understand the dollars and cents of it, but I think that you're over emphasizing what the value of what the street trees provide for a community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Steve, appreciate it.
Evening, Mayor and Councilman. My name is Dave Stoltman. I reside at 525 West 2025 North. The trees I know that are in question here are a lot of these old oak trees, these cypresses. You know, they're huge trees. They're destroying the concrete. I understand that. You know, when I got arrested here from California, me and the wife were driving around looking. And one thing that alerted me, Centerville, was the beautiful flowering plum trees. You know, you guys got it on the park strips. I mean, the homeowners, none of those people have 6 foot those are city owned. You're going to see that along Parish Lane, the 6 foot easement. Everywhere else that there's a building or construction zone or whatever, wherever they built these houses, they're 4 foot. That's the only choice you have. And unless we start to across the highway, they start building the 6 foot. You think you're discouraging this from happening. In my yard, we got a dwarf plum, a dwarf a dwarf peach tree. Beautiful pink flowers in spring. This year, I think I had a dozen people stop, take pictures. Absolutely gorgeous. And like I said, that was one of the things that, you know, when we were looking to where we were going to live when I got arrested here, we drove around and I come across Centerville. I really enjoyed the city. So we decided to buy here. You know, I know the inversion's not getting any better around here. And we should be encouraging you know, trees. Small trees, the roots don't tear up the streets and the curbs and the sidewalks. What's happening is those big cypress oak trees and that have been here for 50 years. No, so surely, like these gentlemen have proposed, these smaller trees that could be on a list, and these will be recommended. And quite frankly, I see what's going on where they're buying back the street here and turning it into a desert scene or whatever. To me, it's gross. It looks absolutely disgusting. And like half of my street's gone that route. I haven't gone that route because I love my green grass and my beautiful tree. You know, but eventually what will happen is once everybody's gone that way, then they'll probably revert back to my style, because I know, sure, it's environmentally friendly and saves water and everything, but to me, it's just an eyesore. You know, and then the rocks are out in the street, and the rocks are kicking up in people's windshields and whatnot's happening there. And so I really wish you guys would reconsider your idea on what you're thinking here. And if you don't, please take down that sign out there that says Centerville's, you know, a city-friendly, you know, environment here, because you guys aren't deserving of that sign if you want to get rid of our trees. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're David Sidbenden. We live on 511 Stagecoach Circle, Centerville. We planted 4 catalpa trees, bonsai catalpas, what they're called, 34 years ago. And we haven't damaged the sidewalk yet with them.
My husband works for you so hard to keep them looking good. He clips them back in the spring and the fall. And if their wind blows, we pick them all up. We spray them so there's no aphids. And our neighbors had big trees in their yard full of aphids. But we spray ours to keep and take care of them. And we have people from coming all over just to see our trees. We've got 2 in the property and 4 out on the strip. And when it's time to take them down, he takes them down, chops them up, and gets rid of them every year. Please don't take my trees, please. Please don't take them. We live in a cul-de-sac. We're not hurting anybody. But the sidewalks haven't been damaged or anything. I just
Thank you.
take them down. Thank you.
My name is Susan Landwater. I live on the corner of 300 East and Chase Lane. if what you propose is true, then the next time you work on Chase Lane, you'll come down and tear out all our trees. This is what my park strip looks like. We had trees in there that before that were original and they were oversized and they were messy and they were a problem and they were getting in power lines. They were leaving plums all over. So we tore them out and we put in these flowering cherries. I researched, I made sure that they were neat and tidy. They didn't get too big. My park strip is less than 4 feet, less than 3 feet. And it provides shade, it provides beauty, it provides oxygen, it provides, you know, beauty to our city. Why take them out? Just because you have a blanket policy to take out all trees out of all park strips? Do you want a barren city? I realize I go for walks. I realize, you know, I walk along 400 East there. Lots of uneven sidewalks from very, very old trees. But I also drive past the Capitol and down that row of all those glorious trees. And why? Why do a city that's barren? I don't understand. I think it's overreaching. It's overextending one policy to satisfy one portion of a need and not looking at the beauty of it. I agree with the man that talked about the global warming and how we need more trees to shade us, to cool us down, because we're seeing more extreme temperatures and heat waves. I just don't understand it. I vote that if you could consider it all, that you come up with some way to have something that people could plant that's acceptable, that they take care of, and have some ownership in if they do lift the sidewalk or do some damage. But it's got to kind of serve everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Susan?
I'm Jenny Roberts at 1139 North, 300 East. I just wanted to, my husband Paul. We just wanted to talk about last night. We had about 100 people gathered in our neighborhood under our tree, enjoying ice cream and cookies and coming together as a community. And, you know, it's really the kind of the spot for our extended neighborhood area where lots of different people can enjoy coming together, new people, people that have been there for a while, as part of a community. And it's the gathering spot under this tree. I would like to see the tree stay. I would like to see all the trees in our neighborhood stay. I think, like other people have said, it helps cool the city, it helps beautify the city, it helps reduce pollution. I also work with people with disabilities. My own brother is uses a wheelchair for his mobility. So I understand that we need the sidewalks. They need to be accessible for everybody. That's an important part of me, an important value that I hold, but I think the city should just make the sidewalks accessible. Maybe the trees that are in can be grandfathered and we can go forward with new trees that in park strips, but I think it would be a mistake to take out some of these beautiful trees that take years to grow and that provide a lot of beauty and community gathering for the city. Thank
Jenny,
you.
what was your address again?
1139 North, 300 East.
I just want to echo what the other gentleman talked about with other cities, how they handle trees, how they promote trees, they plant the trees, they provide the watering bags. They want more trees. I'm in the military, I've been in for 22 years. I've been all over the world. I've been to all over the country, pretty much most of the states, and probably 6 other countries around the world, including Korea, Afghanistan, Kuwait, Germany. And just to kind of zoom out and see all how other countries and communities encourage trees, that trees are life. And I recently was in Philadelphia, and they have beautiful 100-year-old, 200-year-old trees all over the community. And sure, their streets, not their streets, but their sidewalks are bricks. I mean, beautiful bricks, but they are bumpy. Somehow they're not tearing down their trees. What kind of community do we want in Centerville? Do we want a zero-scaped desert Phoenix type campground looking thing, or we want more trees and more vegetation? It's a cheap thing to plant a tree. So.
And take care of the sidewalks though for the people that need them.
Thank you, Jenny and Paul.
My name is Bill Morby. I live at 1011 North U Street. I have 8 trees in the parking strips along my house because I live on a corner. I have 4 on the south side and 4 on the east side. What are the benefit of these trees? All of you know that trees help clean the air. All of you know that trees provide shade. All of you know that trees help cool the climate, not increase it. We're all worried about climate change. If you do your research, you'll find that climate change is only real in metropolitan areas where they've cut down all the trees. The actual degree of the temperature in the world is stayed stable, and only in suburban areas where everything's concrete has the temperature gone up. Do your research on that and see. If we're talking about the future, what's the future without green? What is the future without green? When was the last time you saw a squirrel climb a cement telephone pole? When was the last time did you see a kid sit in the shade of a telephone pole? You know, the future is with trees. The future is everything to do with maintaining what we have that is good. And what we have that is good is green. We talk about water use. There's no more water now than there's ever been. There's no less water. It's just distributed differently. Can you create water? No, we have to save water to put it in the Great Salt Lake so it evaporates, so it can fall somewhere else. No, the idea is to keep the trees, keep nature as perfect as you possibly can, and be thankful that you have those trees. We can replace sidewalks. You can replace the sidewalk in a couple of weeks. It takes you 40 years to replace a good tree. Think about that, and don't make it mandatory that we destroy the blessings that we have. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Bill.
Mayor, City Council. My name is Keith Roper. I live at 139 Briarwood.
Roper?
R-O-P-E-R. We were one of the families that received a letter from Mr. Mark Martin back in December that said there was going to be construction on our road and that they planned to take out the trees in front of our house in the Parkstrip. We moved to 139 Briarwood in August of last year. One of the reasons we purchased our home is because of the beautiful trees that were on the yard. They're on the south side of that house. They provide shade during the summer. They provide shade for the house, reducing our heating bill. And they were a lovely addition to the home. The people who sold us the house were the Mosers, and they told us that their mother or father-in-law built the house back in 1966 or 67. Said that he went to the University of Utah, worked with a professor in horticulture at the University of Utah to find trees that were well suited to a small park strip that wouldn't create root problems, wouldn't disturb the sidewalks and the roads, and planted some lovely flowering. I was told they were flowering pear. I don't know, they could have been flowering plum. When I got the letter from Mr. Martin, it said that we're taking out the trees because they're disturbing your sidewalk, and we found that your sidewalk has a half-inch differential in adjacent slabs within 20 foot of the tree. And apparently that's a death sentence for a tree. So I started to do a little online research and found out, and I'm not a civil engineer, and I'm not a horticulturist or a sidewalk specialist. But what I find online that hasn't been mentioned here is that differentials in those sidewalks come from a lot of different circumstances, not just trees. They come from frost heaves. They come from the quality of constructing the sidewalk. They come from settling that occurs over time after the sidewalk is built. I went out with a ruler to find out if the panels in my sidewalk had a differential of 1/2 inch. I could not measure a 1/2 inch differential, but I did walk up and down Briarwood and measured scores of places where those sidewalk panels were more than a 1/2 inch differential, and there wasn't a tree within 20 feet in any direction. And I also found scores of places on Briarwood where there were trees and there was no 1/2 inch differential. So I think there's a misunderstanding when it comes to trees about the actual damage they do and the actual cost to the city. Hadn't heard that mentioned here, wasn't going to stand up, but we lost our trees. And after they took down the trees and ground out the stumps and didn't do it properly, we have suckers coming up all over the yard now. But when the construction crews came out to work on our yard in the blazing hot heat of June and July, where do you think they stood when they were looking at the street and deciding what to do? They walked over to the west side of our yard where they didn't cut down the trees and stood under the trees. And when the construction crews wanted to take a lunch break, where do you think they took a lunch break? They walked into our yard and sat down under our trees that they weren't able to cut down and enjoyed their lunch there. And then they left their litter there, which I had to clean up, but at least they had some shade. I think it's a really short-sighted policy that's being proposed. And I think there's a misattribution that the damage being done to the sidewalks is coming from the trees, so we should eradicate the trees. I think that you should look at it again closely at that misattribution. Thanks.
Thank you, Keith.
Hello, I'm Crystal Wheeler. This is my husband, Keith. We live at 582 Patty Circle in South Centerville. We're on the corner, so we're cul-de-sac. We have a large park strip, and we have multiple thunderclap plum trees, which are on the approved list that you guys sent out years ago. We have 2 trees that his mom planted. His mom and dad built the house in '83, and we bought the house from them about 20 years ago. And those 2 trees his mom planted, sorry, I'm a little nervous, are 25 years old. And in the area where those are at, there's no damage to the sidewalks at all. And a typical thunderclap lasts about 20 years on average. So you're thinking, if you're looking at your trees, the lifespan, if they're going to cause damage or not, look at the lifespan too. You know, we'll be looking at cutting those ones down and hopefully replacing them as long as you guys don't, as long as it's not banned within the next few years, because their lifespan is about up. But my kids have enjoyed those trees, the shade they provide and the protection from the heat. And, you know, I have a tree we have a silver maple that's probably about a foot further from the sidewalk than our other trees. And what's going to stop you guys from saying, well, that's too close to the sidewalk, we're going to pull that tree out of your front yard? So that's where our concerns are.
We do have a couple of issues with our sidewalks, but it's nowhere near the trees, and it's just the, 30 or 80, was it 83 is when the house was built. They probably didn't pound the ground enough, and the contractor just laid concrete right on top, so it's settled. It's nowhere near the tree. You know, that does happen. It's what, 40 some years old. You're gonna have to have some maintenance done on your property. Sidewalks could eventually got some that are cracking and stuff. I mean, there's no stopping. You're gonna have some issues with sidewalks. They're gonna need to be replaced. And I always keep my eye on the sidewalk. And if I see signs that the tree's getting too big in the area or something, I would cut it down. But now I'll be scared to cut it down because I can't plant a like tree in its place, because basically it's banned now, and it's just a matter of time before a crew comes in and tears my whole yard apart. And you know, if this passed, I mean, your other speakers here have it right. If you guys are going to the extreme to where we'll just ban every tree. Like there's some properties that trees are really not in the way, and there shouldn't be any issues. And I understand the utilities and whatnot, but we got fiber that they ran in our front yard, and now the new fiber that I don't know why my property needs to have two different services or two infrastructure of fiber in my yard, but they ran that in the backyard, and they must have used best people in the world because they punched through our power lines and all sorts of fun stuff. I lost power for a couple of days, and I'm like, you know, when did this happen? Because I wasn't keeping track of these meetings and whatnot. Why do I have to have fiber internet on one side of my yard and then another brand of fiber internet? Yeah, I don't see the phone company coming in and bringing in another phone line, or you know, phones are almost obsolete now. But you know what I'm saying? And
but our easement that won't be the utility line. Our backyard is where our utility lines run. Is what he's trying to get across. So, you know, it's like we want to keep our trees. They're beautiful. My kids like love them. They play in the shade, this parts that, and then also with our sidewalk, the parts that have our sidewalk has never been worked on, and it's 40 years old. My mother-in-law can vouch for that too. So she's been there. She built the house. So
and whatever is brought to my attention that the trees need trimming, whatnot, I'm always out there. The mailman actually pulled up to me because he seen me out there. Say, hey, can you trim these trees? Whatever, you know,
they grew fast. They grew fast.
So I trimmed it right up and everything. So it's not that I'm not maintaining it. Somebody brought it to my attention that the concrete, hey, your concrete might be lifting. Like I said, I would cut down the tree, but now I'd be scared. So I can't replant another tree there. I love the trees. It just kind of puts a little separation between the road and our house. Because like I said, we're right on the corner, so we got a pretty good amount of road there. A lot of cars traveling up. It just kind of takes away from the road noise. A little bit of road noise, but not so much. You just don't see as much car. Some of the trees blew down in that big windstorm and stuff, and I had to replace them and stuff. So they're smaller and stuff. It's not. They used to be bigger and nicer, but I actually, my parents planted the trees, and they used to be closer. So I separated them out a little bit further apart. So I am doing my part to try to keep the trees under control. I'm not, you know, I do see the houses you guys are talking about where you're looking at the trees and like you see the trees, you know, this wide, so it's the roots are kind of growing up. And you know those are the troublemakers there. So why can't we just focus in on that and maybe bring it to the owner's attention or something and get those houses before the houses like mine, where most of my trees now are, you know, they've been replaced back in the day. So they're fairly small trunks now. The biggest ones I got are about that big, what she's talking about now, that I was eyeballing to get rid of anyways, because they're starting to look a little shady or whatnot, and replace it. Now, you know, I'm rethinking that with this talk of, we'll just ban it straight out, you know. That's fine.
Please don't ban our trees. We appreciate you listening.
Thanks, Crystal and Keith.
My name is Randy Reese, and I live on Hughes Street in Centerville. We purchased our home in 1980. In about 1981, 82, we planted 2 dwarf honey locusts in our Parkstrip. Those trees are as old as 1982. I've listened to what you talked about, the sidewalk and the half-inch difference. I have one seam that's probably about a half inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch difference. I also live in the area where we have no secondary water. Prior to moving in, our water rights were sold to the school, Jenny P. Stewart. Therefore, we water our lawns with culinary water. If you take my trees down, I am sure my usage of water would be higher. I would much rather have the option, if I need to replace 2 slabs of cement in my front drive or sidewalk, I would much rather do that because I could put $400 there. I'll go through more than $400 in a summer easily using culinary water to water my yard. And I have no other choice. So Dual Creek or whichever they have for secondary water goes down the middle of Hugh Street, but the cost to tap into that is formidable. So my trees, I'd much rather, I have them clean. Steve's trees, trim them twice a year. They're beautiful trees. They provide a lot of shade. They shade my front yard or my home. I think that it's easier for me to have the trees and to fix the sidewalk than to lose the trees and put out all the other money that would require to cool my home and take care of my yard. Leave my trees alone. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Chuck Neal. I live on 1750 North in Centerville. I'd like to repeat what Dr. Reese said. I'd be willing to pay for the amount to have the sidewalk paid in front of my house. Right now, I do have a lift in my sidewalk, probably about 6 inches. I have a couple of linden trees that were planted 33 years ago when I built the house, and they're very mature now. They provide a lot of shade to our house, and I don't want to lose them. I'd be willing to pay for that. And besides, the kids in my yard like to use them. In my neighborhood, like to use that as a jump when they go down the go down the sidewalk, and I don't want to, have them discouraged with that. But I'd be willing to pay for that.
Thank you, Chuck.
Hi, I'm Nate Sutler. I live at 1857 North 150 East, and we moved into Centerville about almost 9 years ago now. And one of the big things that drew us to our neighborhood is the trees. And to get to my house, I drove up 1825, which is one of the roads that all the trees were ripped out, and it was a travesty what happened on that road. In fact, it is one of the things that is making us consider, when we're looking for a home, to move outside of Centerville to a city like Farmington that encourages trees being planted in their park strip. We've lived in cities in Ohio. In fact, the park strip in Ohio, they call it the tree lawn because everyone plants trees in the tree lawn. It's not a park strip, it's the tree lawn. And I don't think anyone can argue that having large mature trees in your neighborhood is a good thing, and it brings beauty to your neighborhood. It increases your home values. Thank you, Council Member Heyman, for your comment at the start of the meeting. How you guys vote today, what you decide today will affect Centerville 50 years from now. Do you want a city with no large trees lining the streets? Is that what you want? Centerville is a town where there's a lot of multi-generational families. We moved in 9 years ago. I love this town. I love everything about it. But like I said, that's one thing that has made me consider, as we look for our next home, looking outside of Centerville for that very reason. As you go around the city and you see the trees that have lifted the sidewalk, the vast majority of them are the honey locust trees. I have one of them in front of my house. They are probably a tree that, everyone wishes wouldn't have been on the list back in 1983, and I'm sure we didn't have a list back then. They're one of the trees that is lifting the sidewalk in many locations. And as you've heard from other people, we have plenty of trees that isn't, they don't lift the sidewalk. And so as a city, we have a list that tells us what trees you can plant in the tree line or in the park strip. Sounds like we already solved this problem. Why do we need to go another step further and say we're banning all trees in the tree line? We already solved that problem. Okay, we have a list of approved trees. I'm 100% opposed to banning all trees in the tree lawn, and I'm 100% opposed to cutting down existing trees in the tree lawn. What is the cost of what is the value of a mature tree? How much does it cost to grind down the sidewalk? In front of my house, we moved in, like I said, almost 9 years ago. It was ground smooth. I think there's one joint that's come up maybe an inch in 9 years. Why don't we, use some of our money, and maybe every 10 years we'll go and grind the sidewalk where it's a problem. split the city up into 10 different regions and every year do one of them. Grinding sidewalks isn't a big cost. It doesn't cost a lot compared to tearing out trees, redoing sidewalks. And then I listened to some of the meetings that you had prior about this, and I know a few of you were talking about how, you know, this is taxpayer money. We need to be judicious with how we spend this money. But yet we have this program, Mayor, that you said that we're spending $100,000 a year for trees, for homeowners to voluntarily have their trees ripped out. So these are, it doesn't matter if they're problem trees or not. In fact, there was a tree on my street that was ripped out, and that homeowner previously had actually pulled up the sidewalk, cut the tree roots, and he did the sidewalk years ago. So the sidewalk had no bumps or anything in it. But, you know, he didn't want to deal with the trees anymore, and I'm fine with that. If a homeowner doesn't want a tree in front of their house, great, take it down. But why should taxpayers be paying for that to be done? Like, that makes no sense. If we want to be judicious with our taxpayer funds, that's what we should be looking at. Why don't we use a fraction of that money and grind down sidewalks and keep those large trees? I think we should be done with letting homeowners request their trees be removed and we come remove it for free. I think removal of trees should be only for those select very problematic trees that were out of options for grinding and things like that. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, appreciate it. I want to clarify one thing. When I came into office, sidewalks had been marked with yellow paint. The $100,000 a year is to fix sidewalks, but obviously when you fix a sidewalk, it's really bad. The tree's going to damage it again. So the program was to fix sidewalks mainly, but we've been willing to those people who want trees removed, remove the tree as well. So, but it was mainly to fix sidewalks and the liability of sidewalks. All right, more.
Sorry, Nate, can I get your last name one more time? Stetler, thank you.
My name is Johnny Louder. I live at 1880 North, 300 East. There is damage along my sidewalk in one place. And that's because they had a water line break. One of the pipes in the street broke and the water rushed down to my tree and was stopped by the tree. Now, I said to the people who came to fix the water line, what are you going to do about this? And they said, that's not my job. But if somebody comes there to my house now and sees it, oh, that's by the tree, therefore take the tree out. The damage was not done by the tree. The damage was done by the flood of water. So we have to have some kind of checks and balances here. Yes, if there are really trees that are bad, then I can understand something. But just to come in with a blanket idea and nobody has checks and balances, nobody has any say in it, that's wrong. Especially in my case, where it was a city water line that broke and did the damage. And when I asked about it, they said it's not my job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we're Daniel and Grace T. We live at 1128 North, 300 East. And I guess probably one comment I want to make is that there's no free lunch. Trees are worth the cost. I'm a bald guy. I go from shade to shade to shade as I go on my walks. And shade is a valuable thing. And so whether it's $100,000 a year for the entire city or more, I know that we have to be reasonable, but that investment is worth it. So I'm in favor of keeping the trees.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, both of you. Any others? Because when I close the public hearing, the city council is going to start discussing. Come on up.
I'm Delynn Van Tussenbrook. I don't want to tell you where I live because I have a bad sidewalk. I live in Centerville, Utah. And no, I'm not. I live on 1850 North.
I know where you live. I wouldn't have told him.
I know. I would have been found out anyway. I knew that.
I was gonna say, I can find you.
Oh, yeah. You just gotta look me up anyway, right? Couple of things, a lot of things actually have gone through my mind, but a thought just hit me about, talking about the future. And I think about my grandchildren going for a walk. And it's often usually on a sidewalk because that's where it's safe, right? That's where we go for a lot of walks as older people. And that's where we take our grandkids and where young moms and dads take their kids is on the sidewalk. I can't imagine in the future, probably we'll all be gone and there's no trees along the sidewalks. You know what's going to happen? They're going to stop going on walks because it's so blankety blank hot here. And whether you believe in climate change or not, the shade's what's saving a lot of us. Honestly, it is. I have only 2 trees in my yard we planted 2 last year that are this big around because that's all we could afford, and they're in our backyard. So we won't ever enjoy those trees, but I am thinking of the future. But those 2 trees in the front, which are lifting my sidewalk, shade my whole front yard because it's a small front yard. But they shade my whole front yard, and that's where I sit with my grandkids and sometimes my husband because we don't have any shade in our backyard. And I think about that, and I thought about that a lot tonight. I know there's been a lot of emotional, thoughts given here. And I know that city planning goes beyond the emotion. You've got to look at the fiscal planning and all of that. But I'm thinking, is this mostly a money situation for the city where the city is, tiring maybe of replacing the sidewalks? Are we trying to solve a money issue here? Because if we're looking towards the future, I don't want to be known as the city that took down all the trees either. I don't want to be the city that's in the newspaper and on the internet, the city that took down trees. From the time we start reading books. I mean, I read The Little White House. The Little White House books, that's how old I am. But that whole series was around the tree in the front yard with a little bench around it. And I still think about that. That's where the kids come together and play picnic. That's where mom brings out the sandwiches and they play picnic. It's where you go for relief from these horribly hot summers that we have, which I believe we're just in a cycle of nature, but that's a whole different discussion. So, like I said, I have quite a bit of lift where these 2 trees are. But if I lose my shade and I have to explain to my grandkids why those trees had to come out, I don't know. That makes me kind of sad to live here. And I never thought I would say that. And I do know that a neighbor near to me has said, this is not a threat. That's kind of funny. But he said, if anyone comes for my trees, I'll go grab my, what? And, but he might not live right next to me, might live far away. So you don't. Anyway, that's not me. That's not my thing. I'm just saying. And I only bring that up because it tells you the passion that people have for trees because you nurture them, you water them, you take care of them. If the wind starts blowing, you watch them like you would your own child. And you take care of them. And it's the only thing I've seen grow to fruition in my yard. They're probably around 25, 30 years old. And I've seen a lot of my neighbors take their trees down, mostly because of the wind. And mine, I'm like, I can't. They're mine. I know they're not mine, but they're the community's. And so I hope you'll just consider the future and the walks. And if people stop going on walks, I don't want to be in the city that voted down all the trees. Thank you.
Wouldn't you have loved to have her as a school teacher? She's fun. Thanks, Mrs. Van Tussen. But anyone else?
I'm Joy Chambers. I live on 1975 North. I talked to you guys 2 weeks ago. I served on the city tree board for the first 4 years that the tree board was implemented. And so I have tried to do my research on these things. We suggested the tree voucher program, which I really am grateful that the city has implemented. We suggested trees that would be better for park strips, though we recognize that no trees are ideal. Sorry, Robin, you're all the way over there. But no trees are ideal for narrow park strips, but we suggested trees that would be the best idea for that. We spoke with city council. Some of you were on the city council when I was there, and we talked to city council about these things. Maybe half of you weren't when I was there. But we, this has seemed to be a concern for the city for a while. I know that the city tree board has wonderful people who can give suggestions of things that other cities have done. We did research on that, like things that other cities have done to be able to keep trees and take care of them and still make it ADA acceptable and things like that. So the city tree board is a good resource for those types of things. I recognize this is a difficult situation, but as I just tried to do some research since 2 weeks ago, just walking around my neighborhood, there are trees that are in park strips where there's no problems with the sidewalks. So that are mature trees, not trees that have just been planted, but mature trees that are not causing problems. So again, I just echo the things that have been said, that considering the long-term issue that this would create, I have a couple of questions that, is there long-term data that shows how removing all trees will affect a community? Have we done research in looking at what other cities actually are doing this, that are removing all trees? And what is the long-term implications for that? I think that would be very important for you guys to consider before making a decision. Yes, let's just remove all trees. How is that really going to impact our community? And have we seen cities that do that? And how has that benefited the community? How has that benefited the city? I think those things need to be considered. Again, it's been said, this seems like a very extreme measure, and I think that there can be a more balanced approach in this. I do not have trees in my park strip, and I know that there are people who came last time and possibly this time who also do not have trees in their park strip. So this is not just an issue that that it only affects the people who have the trees in the park strip. This is a really big deal to me. I added 9 trees to my yard. I did not add any to the park strip, but this impacts me, and it impacts people who do not have trees in the park strip, as well as the people who do have trees in the park strip. So I think a lot has been said. I agree with what has been said, and I just wanted to add a little bit more to that. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Joy. Okay, it looks like we're done. Speak once, twice, forever hold the peace. I will close the public hearing then. and we will discuss amongst council. Now, usually with these public hearings, or quite a few of them, there's an applicant, you know, wanting a zoning change or something like that. And the applicant gets to respond to the public. So since we don't have an applicant, since this is proposed city ordinance, then we get to respond to it. I'll take the first stab at it as mayor. I think the city council has a tough decision to make on their hands. Okay, I think they know where I stand. I don't have trees in my park strip, but I love trees. I have tons of trees in my yard. But with that said, they know that I'm not for banning trees in the park strip. That's why I've had a tree board come up with suggested trees. Now, I spoke with the neighbor 2 weeks ago. He said that 20 years ago, behind our homes, probably 23, 24 years ago, just before I moved in, there was trees that were affecting the roots, affecting utility lines. The city came through at that point in time and volunteered to take the trees out at their cost, unless they wanted to sign a waiver. I talked to my neighbors, 2 of them signed waivers, that they would be responsible if that caused any damage for those repairs. That's the type of thing that I think that this ordinance needs to be modified and have in it. I've reached out to my other mayors. There's 15 cities in Davis County, 7 of them responded. All 7 do not have ordinance banning trees in park strips. 2 of them that don't have anything. 5 of them have suggested trees that are in park strips. So even Farmington, they have suggested trees in park strips. And then I was looking here at the tree board, and they've done a great job. They have that on our website. I would also venture to say, though, that if you go around Centerville, I'm trying to be objective on this thing, that probably this is unscientific. Okay, this one. So we probably should get a scientific. Probably about 70% of these 4-foot park strips don't have trees in them. And so probably a lot of you that spoke tonight do have trees in park strips. I have neighbors that have trees in park strips. I live in an area where there's lots of trees in park strips. And I've seen some areas where it doesn't seem to affect the sidewalk. Now, whatever you do, you have to be careful whatever tree you put in, because I was walking through my yard. I have a tree 10 feet back from the sidewalk that I just noticed cleaning up my yard last week. It's one of those locust trees that the roots spreading out so far that it's raising the sidewalk, even being 10 feet back. So there's all, it's important. And I hired a landscaper, probably, I don't think we had our approved tree list yet when we put those trees in, but so there's a lot to take on here. I don't, I'm afraid that I might miss something, but I don't want to do all the talking, so I'll let the staff and city council respond to some of your concerns as well too. So council, staff.
Mr. Mayor, if there's a silence off, I do want to lead off, maybe give a little bit more background for those that are here as well as council. In 2018, when we started this conversation, really the impetus was the infrastructure damage to the water lines, to all the infrastructure in the park strips. You could see, we had a display at that time where you could see a tree root around a pipe, and I wish we still had that visual aid, because it really was eye-opening, where you could see it was causing damage to that water line. And so you're starting to see those trees. So that really was a big part of the reason why we had this conversation to start with, is just understanding that relationship between our infrastructure, our utilities, as well as these trees in the park strip. And then it led to where we had our streets crew just observing the amount of money that we're spending repairing sidewalks. So it is kind of a money thing to that area, right? And just coming back and actually having repeat offenders where we're spending more and more money on the same tree. And so to the credit of our staff, and I'll be honest, the Centerville City is wonderful at this, and that's what I love about us, is we do a really good job keeping our costs low and observing and trying to be judicious and, you know, frugal with our taxpayer funds. And so really, this has come from just observing this cost that honestly, we have a responsibility as staff to keep within our budget. And we have a responsibility to the taxpayers and the money that you're spending, that we've done our best in identifying areas where maybe we can be better. Now, the proposal that's coming forward was a combination of tree board and staff having conversations and also looking at our liability as a city. The park strip is our liability. If there's damage to a water line to Dual Creek or any of the utilities, or it's our responsibility if that tree causes that, because it's our park, it's the park strip is part of the right of way. If there's an accident or a trip and fall on the sidewalk, the city is liable, and we do receive claims across the nation. We see a lot of claims. So those trips are we're very concerned more about those huge costs that we will bear, that will also increase taxpayer money and property taxes to pay for those claims out. So we do have a responsibility to identify and repair. So there's all of this happening where we feel, and I think this is what's great about Centerville. We've done a pretty good job keeping our costs low across the board, but still providing, I think, an excellent standard of living, quality of life here in Centerville. Our property taxes are relatively low compared to other cities, and it's really because of our staff. So a lot of this is coming from that, and you won't find any of our staff who says we don't like trees. We all love trees. I have 20 trees in my yard. We all love trees, and this isn't necessarily a proposal that comes lightly, but just recognizing that really the standard of practice for Centerville for all these years has been to keep our costs low and be very judicious with our funds. There is an opportunity. You look at these other cities who do have trees in their park strip, it is very costly programs. Murray City is $1 million a year to have their program. Farmington also has their own urban forestry program. It is a costly program, but it's not to say we couldn't do it. The trees couldn't be allowed in the park strip. And you won't necessarily see a staff saying there isn't a way. There is a way, but it's a costly way. And that's a direction the council, you all need to decide whether or not we want to support that increase. And I would argue there'd be an increase in this to support the program of 5 to 10% property tax increase to support the 100,000 potentially going to 200,000 or 300,000 to the grinding. Now, grinding can only happen so far before we need to start replacing panels, and it becomes costly. We've talked about the idea of maybe the homeowners bearing that responsibility, and I will share that. I do appreciate the two of you that said we'll bear the responsibility for this. You're 2 out of 10. And we've done this a long time, where it is hard to recover funds of those who may not be financially able to, as much as we would like the homeowners to be responsible for that damage. It's really challenging to recover those costs. And so there has been a shift, potentially us taking on that responsibility and paying for the trees. But really it should be borne by the homeowner. But not every homeowner can afford that and take responsibility for their trees. We have claims where trees on the sidewalk overhanging over the street and sidewalk, you have a requirement to have it maintained 7 feet minimum above the sidewalk or street. And that's not being maintained, which again creates a line of sight issue. If any of you have driven out a Quick Quack car wash, have you noticed your line of sight issue is problematic? We can't have the low hanging trees. I know that was mentioned. There is a need to have a minimum height. And then when you have shrubs, there needs to be a maximum height. There's 4 feet. There's that area that it doesn't matter what you have, because line of sight becomes an issue and potentially can cause some accidents. So there is a possibility of having trees in the park strip, but recognizing there's a liability. Really, the city is the one who bears that responsibility for those that has trees in the park strip, and that would be potentially a cost that would have to come through a budget to pay for that. We're not opposed to that. Mark will agree with me because we've talked about this. We're not opposed if that's the direction we want to go, but we have a responsibility to protect the liability of our city, to protect the taxpayer funds. That is our responsibility. So again, that's where we come to today, and maybe this is the hammer, and it's a little too much. I don't disagree with that. We have talked to staff, and we recognize maybe there's a need, the possibility where trees aren't causing damage to the sidewalk, that they can stay. They're absolutely, that's something that can happen. Now the question has come into play: does the homeowner give us a $3,000 to $5,000 bond that if that tree does cause damage in the future, that we can call on that bond? some of you would be willing to pay that. And we would hold that money and we could use that. But again, 2 out of 10, I think is what we'll get. The other 8 will not be able to afford that, right? So to remove the tree is the cost that would be borne by the homeowner. So we're talking about panels is one thing, but right now the city is bearing the cost of moving that tree. We'd put that back on the homeowner, say it's your responsibility if you don't do that. So that's, let me just finish. So again, there are so many opportunities here of directions we can go. So what's been presented to you has been a recommendation by tree board, a combination of arborists who understand and a little bit more than many of us do about trees and what they can and can't accomplish, as well as those who would like that desire to have those trees. So it's a combination of both, with staff input recommending and helping them understand what our concerns are. So I'll leave that there, but there is a possibility of different directions moving forward. We're open to that. We're open to that. We just want to make sure you understand what those unintended consequences may be with whatever direction we go.
Can you give an example of what you believe those unintended consequences costs are?
Yeah.
For example, I mentioned this in the last meeting and I'll mention it here for those that there are some hidden costs that we don't totally understand at the city level. I call the sewer district. Sewer lines are particularly notorious for tree roots. They seem to attract to each other. And so South Davis Sewer District spending about $250,000 a year on tree roots in sewer lines and relining them. And that isn't necessarily like the cost on the sewer district side. It's the cost on the property owner side. They're going in at cost and fixing it for the homeowner. I think they charge $20 a foot, which is really reasonable compared to what it would be to hire a contractor. So I know there are benefits to trees that are not a dollar amount. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but I am concerned about utilities and some of the other things that you've talked about. If we want to keep the trees in the park strips, what does that look like moving forward? Is it extra staff? What do we need?
Yeah, potentially. So if you're looking at other cities like Farmington or I won't say Salt Lake, I don't think that's really a fair comparable, but just looking at a Farmington or a Layton, they do invest quite a bit of money. I don't know, they don't break down their budget. I haven't contacted them directly to see how much. Okay. But again, we have a responsibility with our sidewalks. We are falling behind a little bit on our sidewalk program. And again, that's the liability. Whether or not, because I don't disagree with the statement that some trees just don't cause the problem. It's absolutely true that some trees do not cause that. But we have responsibility to sidewalks. So if we want to go that direction, it could require staff. And I don't want to necessarily get to the point where we have a full-time crew actually doing all the trimming along the streets and taking care of everybody's park strip trees. But just monitoring that and helping homeowners and educating, I think could be a very big help if we have a homeowner who says we can help them trim their trees or find a way. So I think there's some opportunity, but there would definitely be an increase in the budget.
Increase in staff. The reason I'm asking is because the last time that we did analysis and mapped all the trees in the city that were park strip or all trees. I don't remember. 2017.
Mostly park strip trees, I think, right behind.
And 7 feet.
And 7 feet.
And then on top of that, also you mapped all of the sidewalk differentials, and there were over 10,000. We've fixed 2 miles of 95 miles. I mean, you're right. I'm trying to say that is also a concern, that being fiscally responsible to the residents here, and you guys do own, you are the city. That is what makes up the city. Being fiscally responsible, we are not keeping up with it. We've covered 2 miles of sidewalk issues, and we have 95 total miles of sidewalks.
So I want to add something. First off, that was Brent Hansen, our city manager, and I appreciate him immensely. I meet with him weekly. He is the person here that's full time with staff running the city. I get briefed. I get caught up with what's going on. I put my input. He is very conscious of our costs, And I appreciate that. And I'm very conscious of our costs as well as this whole council as well too. I'm a CPA. I mean, that's what I do. That's in my line of work. I'm very conscious of cost. This, what I'm talking about doing, it does not make sense from a financial standpoint. I'm a big supporter of people having the right to have trees in their park strip, but I think it has to be the right tree. Okay. Now 6-foot park strips, we're talking mainly here, correct me if I'm wrong, staff, we're saying the recommendation is over 6 feet park strips. Now 6 feet park strips is what we have down by Quick Black. So we're talking about saving sidewalks. We're not talking about saving utilities underground, because 6-foot park strips, you put trees in, those roots are still going to reach down and affect utilities.
Right.
So we're talking mainly sidewalks here. And that's why this ordinance is here mainly for sidewalks.
And that's how it's evolved, Mayor. So I don't disagree. It's evolved from that infrastructure to then sidewalks. And then we talk about the wind. If you have a 4-foot root and the wind comes in, it doesn't really have that stability. So it's evolved. Our conversation has evolved over 6 years. And what is, again, the cost to it, that's what we have to decide, whether it's more staff, Councilmember Hirsch, or what it may be. That's a decision for you to make. And decide if that's where we want to spend our taxpayer money. With all of our other competing obligations that we have, that's entirely a decision for the council to decide. Is it worth that cost? I personally agree with that being worth the cost. But the taxes, right? It depends. If we have 30%, Mayor, I'll use your number, 30% of the city has trees in the park strip. You have 70% of the residents who don't, that are participating and supporting those 30% who do have trees in the park strip. So they're helping fund that, right? Now that's for you to decide whether that's fair or equitable. Those who have trees in the park strip, should they be the ones who bear the full cost? Well, that's challenging because not everybody can afford that. We have this conversation quite often where we have fixed income residents who couldn't make, but they do enjoy that benefit, as well do the residents who walk the neighborhood. We've had this conversation multiple times where I miss my neighbor having their tree that I can walk under. And I agree with that.
But as I've said, we've had this program now for 4 years, and I've said, let's continue it for a year or two. Those that can't afford the damage of replacing the sidewalk themselves could elect to have their trees removed. Okay. And those that can, like the example I gave 25 years ago in my neighborhood, is signing a waiver, posting a bond, or whatever legal requirements we need to say that they will bear the cost of replacing that sidewalk.
So can you just explain, I'm not sure everyone's gonna understand what the bond is. You said a $2,000 or $3,000 bond.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily that they're paying that up front. They're paying for a bond.
Paying for a bond or escrow and giving the funds. How much does it cost to remove a tree? Just again, grind the stump. We're not talking about roots. Was a different discussion, but Mark, what is our cost right now?
We probably average $1,200-$1,500 a tree.
$1,200-$1,500 a tree.
Mm-hmm. But to your point, it would be a cash bond or an escrow.
That's
It's
what
not
we-
like a performance bond where you pay a company
To cover it.
Yes,
Okay.
You're thinking
Yeah.
about
I just
engineering
wanted to
costs,
make
yeah.
sure we were all on the
It
same
is
page
money
with that
That's a helpful
definition.
clarification.
Right.
But that's today's dollars. Again, just I don't want to be too, that's today's dollars. And if it's moved in 10 years, there is some interest accruing. Does that still cover that cost? That's,
I mean,
again, that generally the argument is the trees that are removed should be borne by the homeowner. Now, voluntarily, I would say if it's involuntarily, it shouldn't be borne by the homeowner. But if it's voluntarily, it should be borne by the homeowner. But that's a different point. Is our ordinance says it's borne by the homeowner, and we have been taking on that cost again, just to recognize that in the long run, it's less expensive to pay for that tree removal today than it's continually repair a sidewalk.
Years past, we did continually repair the sidewalk. That was the practice. When
And that's the
trees-
$100,000 with 100% of repairing the
But that was
sidewalk.
even before the 100,000. That was when we were budgeting $20,000 a year for sidewalk work.
Well, why did that stop?
Why did it stop?
Yeah, I don't.
Because there was case law where tree roots were cut from a municipality and the tree blew over and damaged property and the city was sued. So for us, we were cautioned by our legal counsel to not do that.
I think that's my concern about it, is just that I think there's like this I'm not normally a person that wants to just live in fear, but I am concerned about things like the liability to the city, because the park strip is part of the right of way and the sidewalk is part of the right of way. I think that's the thing that just weighs heavily for me, is that I really am an advocate of letting people do what they want in their little patch of Eden. But because that is not property that is owned by the individual, I'm concerned about it.
Well, and we have federal mandates that are pushed down us on the state level and as state to city level, and we ADA, federal ADA is anything vertical that is 1/4 inch vertical is considered a ADA hazard.
And to that point, I was walking in my own neighborhood this last week and I tripped over a sidewalk that was uplifted 1/2 inch, but there were no trees around. This is not something that can be solely put on the trees. And so what I'm gonna just take my moment here and state that it's true that the city owns these parking strips and sidewalks. With real property ownership, property owners are often, property owners have what's often referred to as the bundle of rights. And in the bundle of rights, people have the right to enjoy that property. And they've had that right up to this point. And we're looking at this ordinance to take away that property right from not just the people that have trees, but from the people that don't as well, that would have the opportunity in the future to plant trees. So for me, this ordinance does not represent what Centerville is about. It's a heavy-handed ordinance. It limits our rights. And yes, personal responsibility is important. And I believe that that's something that we should focus on more than prohibiting the trees. We should focus on the list that was provided by the tree board and those recommendations, and allow people to continue that enjoyment that they have in the parking strip.
Brian, to be specific, what rights are you referring to as it relates to property that is not owned?
The parking strip is owned by the city.
Correct. I'm saying, but you're saying that a bundle of rights is taken away from citizens.
So there's a certain amount of, right. So there are the right of possession or occupancy, the right of control or use, the right of exclusion of or derivation of income, the right of enjoyment or benefit, and the right of disposition or transfer. Now, you can give rights away through contracts or through other means.
I understand that. I'm just saying, within the park strip, and Lisa may have to chime in on this. I don't know that
they don't have. We don't have
those rights.
We have that right. We have that right. It is implied that we have the right to enjoy that park strip.
Well, I mean, there are some, property owners are required to maintain the park strip. We do put that on there, and they are required to, it used to be you had the landscape park strip, now we allow some hardscape.
Right.
So there are some requirements of occupancy and use. Since they don't own the underlying fee, I'm not certain I would call it a bundle of rights, but they have a few, I suppose. But
the city owns the
trees-
bundle of rights. And the city gave or implied that we had the right to enjoy that park strip because we take care of it. We do all of these things, and we should, and there was an implication that we should be able to enjoy that. The city had that bundle of rights. That's
Oh,
you know
yeah,
that.
I agree with that. Yes, because the city owns the property. So we.
That wasn't my
bundle of
question,
rights.
though.
Okay.
My question was related to
but
private property.
we imply that they are able to enjoy that. by just allowing them to do
Or
that.
is it more that the park strip is there to provide all of the utilities that we need to enjoy our property behind the sidewalk? I'm not suggesting I get what you're saying. I'm just not sure that,
I'm just saying, I
not
think that's a
trying, I mean, I
stretch
want to find a
in my
middle of
mind.
the,
You think it's a stretch? You don't enjoy your park strip?
I appreciate that my
think
park
it's a
strip
stretch to-
provides all
to-
my
I
things
think
I
it's a
need.
stretch to insinuate you have a full bundle of rights as if it's.
I didn't, I don't want to insinuate that we have the full bundle of rights as the property owner of the parcel that we are living on. The strip that is there.
That's what I want to clarify.
Okay, okay, but we do have one of those rights, which is the enjoyment or benefit of that piece of, or that parking strip, or that tree strip.
So I mean, I want to add
Sorry,
one.
let me just add,
Okay.
the city does own it. So if the city decides, hey, we want to widen this road and put a street in, we have every right to do that. We
Well,
own the
you
property, so
should.
they're just using the park strip and maintaining it while it's still in our right of way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's where I say, it's case law. It's not just because of our code that if there's a tree in the park strip that damages public property, it's the private property owner's response who planted that tree or owns that tree. They are liable under case law, not just because our code says that. That's just the standard, but the city has been very generous in not pursuing that. And we've been taking them out at the city's cost.
So I have a question, because they just came through Centerville and put a lot of fiber underneath. So if I plant a tree in my park strip and its roots go down and damage the fiber, am I responsible to have to pay for the fiber?
I believe so. Yeah, it's not, yeah, it's if the tree, if they can establish, if the company can establish that the tree caused the damage, obviously there's a causation standard that would have to be proven, but, and it's the tree causing the damage, yes.
How far was the fiber dug down? And how long does it take the tree root to get to that fiber? Mark, do you know?
No.
I don't know
Do you
that
know
that,
how long, do you know how deep the fiber or all these utilities are?
The minimum utility depth is typically 24 inches.
It varies on the type of
No,
utility
yeah.
though. The
Right,
sewer is
right.
down
Yeah,
feet.
Yes.
And the
Your communications-
telecommunications are
depends
20.
on, yeah,
your communications 24, gas deeper, water deeper, sewer is gonna be your deepest.
It's kind of like
Most of
some
airplane
of
them
it's
pattern.
where the
Each one
freestyle
has
line
their own.
is.
But
Yeah.
having said that, even on our projects this year, they pulled sidewalk up and the utility was laying right underneath the sidewalk. It was actually poured in the sidewalk.
Wow.
So,
That's bad construction then. The utility company should be held liable then,
but the contractor's held
sometimes-
liable.
or the contractor.
Right.
Mark, will you just remind me, I think I had this right, but tell me if I'm missing any. During our last meeting, I'd asked you what utilities run through the park strip. And I think I had written down water, gas, cable, phone, power, secondary water, and sewer. All of those lines run underneath the park strip.
In some variations, because some are
In some
parallel,
Some are
and some are
parallel,
lateral.
some are perpendicular.
And so,
Sewer and water would be, for the most part.
because I know that we've spent a lot of time talking about sidewalks. And that's the thing that I think people see. And so it makes sense that people are talking about the sidewalks, but the part that people are not maybe thinking about as much, at least I didn't appreciate as much until we started having this discussion, is just how much complication the root system getting into all of those different lines can create when they need to get access to them or when we're doing roads. I mean, I've seen, we didn't see them here today, but we've seen prior pictures where like literally roots have grown around the infrastructure.
And on 1825, it's been mentioned before that they had to saw each end of it and remove the root structure out and then replace the utilities. That's the reality of it, is the roots are destructive to the utilities.
How old was that tree?
They were the ones on 1825. They were fairly old.
They were fairly old. So
Mhm.
we're talking about trees that have been here for years and years. We're not talking about something these are new trees. And so we shouldn't be limiting what we're doing now because of these older trees that have been placed 30, 40 years ago. But we should actually look at protecting them as well, because they do have an invaluable addition to our communities. I have multiple trees in my neighborhood that are in parking strips, and it would be a travesty to have. It would be absolutely a travesty to our community, to our neighborhood, to have those trees removed. And I just think that we are being short-sighted, that this is something that we can mitigate with shaving down sidewalks until we can't anymore and replacing it with $400 a panel.
But here's the issue with
Mark's turn. Mark.
Yep. So we've heard years, 30, 40, 25 years for these ages of these trees. We are building 100. Be in this room will be alive the next time we rebuild Briarwood Drive. Nobody in this room will be alive the next time we rebuild 1250 North. That's the reality.
My grandchildren.
Your great-great-grandchildren.
Even so.
But that's the reality we face, is we don't have the proper funding to maintain the almost 60 miles of road and the almost 100 miles of sidewalk. We don't have properly allocated funding to keep it ADA accessible and have it safe for everybody to use.
And I think, I don't want to speak for everybody, I think everybody on council agrees to that. That's why I'm so big on public responsibility. I took down 3 of our 4 trees in our big trees in our front yard 15 years ago because they weren't good for the winds. They were cottonwoods and they were maples, and they were not good in the wind at all. We left one of them because we wanted the others to grow up. Now we replaced with trees that would work. Now, that last tree, it's buckling my driveway because it's not in the park strip. I'm going to take that down that tree, much to my wife's disdain, but she wants a new driveway, and I'm going to take down the tree because I'm not going to replace the driveway and leave that tree up. And that's what I'm saying. If people want trees in Parkstrip, I say we go for the recommended trees. They bear the responsibility because this is an ordinance, as we just pointed out, that's about sidewalks. If it was about utilities, we wouldn't even allow them in 6-foot park strips. I mean, because it's about sidewalks here. And if people want to take on their personal responsibility, that's what life's about. They're taking their own responsibility on, and they bear the cost, and the city doesn't have to bear the cost. And 70% of the city that doesn't have trees in the park strip doesn't have to bear the cost. They do. And that's why I say Brent brings out a good point. There's people that can't afford to do that. Well, we've had a program for them for years if they want to take them down, if they can't afford to fix their sidewalk and fix their tree. We haven't had to do that. We've done that to be kind and helpful.
Yeah.
Mark, am I misunderstanding? Mayor has said that the only reason that we're pushing this is for sidewalks. Is that true?
Well, we have an ordinance for the public utility easement as well. So it's not just, I mean, you've written an ordinance that doesn't just talk about sidewalks. There's 3 ordinances here. There's the sidewalk replacement, there's the ordinance regarding the park strips, and the ordinance regarding the public utility easement.
Yeah, am I misunderstanding? I thought that part of the issue here is that we don't want the trees in the park strips because we're running so many infrastructure lines.
Utilities are a part of the equation as well, for sure. The infrastructure that other companies have is part of the equation.
As a point of potential problem solving, if we take a suggested route, which I appreciate that multiple members of our community have said, including the mayor, hey, if somebody wants to bear the responsibility, that's great.
Yeah,
we are. That is a little challenging in some respects because you are predicting that someone in the future will have financial wherewithal to take that upon themselves, and or we
Or
as a
we do the
community.
bond.
Correct, and so that's where my question is going to.
Yeah, okay.
What is the acceptable cash bond amount that staff would suggest to council that a resident would post if they say, I'm going to take responsibility for this tree out into the future, despite me knowing about all the potential challenges? Is it the $3,000 to $5,000? Is it $1,500? Like that's, I think, I'm just trying to get maybe to a potential compromise position where we take into account the real world application where we heard from our residents and we know, and also trying to find the balance of the cost and the liability associated with it. Because that waiver isn't just a cost waiver. I think it's also a liability waiver. However, how enforceable that might be, I don't know, but there is that component. But
okay,
are we
hang on,
talking
hang
about?
on with your,
So, well, I
what's
just
the
wanna
shake
say-
of the head?
I know, because
No,
what
if somebody trips on the
liability waiver
sidewalk,
is
we
truly,
cannot
yeah.
Pass that obligation to maintain our
Okay.
sidewalks onto a private property owner. They could sign it. But,
I mean, I can buy
don't
a
think
ski
we're-
pass. and-
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
No,
you.
it's
I
okay.
just wanted to understand the
So-
shake of the
Because
head.
I saw the shake of the head too, Gina.
Yeah.
staff is not prepared today to give you an estimate on the bond. We
Yeah.
would just be guessing, but because there's a number of factors. I mean, you've seen the huge ones. If you've got a tree, 100-foot tree from Parkstrip to curb, that's gonna be tens of thousands of dollars to take out
Correct.
versus
It's-
one, but how long is the tree gonna be there? So anyway, we would have to do more research.
And that's the
Come back on
problem
bond.
is we can't predict into the future. And I'm not saying we can't do it as best as we can, but there is some
But it's a tool
theoretical
to put in your
equation that
toolbox.
says, what's the age of the tree and how long am I going to let it grow and grow?
But you've got to have somebody to assess that.
I know, and then are you gonna update a
wait.
bond every 10 years? Like, this becomes a bit of a tracking, well, not a bit.
Right.
It becomes a substantial tracking challenge to say, well, you posted your $3,000 to $5,000 bond 5 years ago, but now your tree's bigger and the potential hazards are greater, so now you gotta post another $2,000 to $3,000. And this feels like, oh, bureaucracy gone awry, which.
So
That's what
I will share, Nate is dying a little inside. I just want to share that.
I agree. I know.
So-
I'm thinking about staff and thinking, oh,
So
we need to hire a separate.
we've
tree
talked about
supervisor.
escrow cash bond, but I'll be honest, the easiest way is just to deal with them when the time comes, right? One of the challenges of doing any type of code enforcement is when you try to enforce the code, there's challenges, whether it's a financial challenge or a political challenge or whatever the case might be. And that's where staff gets kind of hung up sometimes when we try to enforce the code, is that each circumstance is unique and it's really challenging to enforce.
Yeah,
But it
Because
almost
the other
feels
note
better
that I
just
put
to.
down here, Brent, is, okay, if you're gonna deal with it at the time and somebody doesn't have that financial capability to do it, I don't want to put staff or anybody in a weird position where we have to lien a property.
Well, but we're a compassionate, really, we want to find
I
that
agree.
balance, right? Because these are tough conversations
Yeah.
to have with residents that really Nate staff are having these tough conversations with residents and trying to find a way to work it out by still protecting, the city funds, city taxpayer funds, as well as utility accounts, but also trying to find that balance of trying to work with the resident to find a best path forward. Because that's a really a tough fine line that we walk. But if we're talking about allowing trees to stay in the park strip, I don't necessarily want to go with a cash bond. I'd almost prefer to deal with it at the time, but we need political
What
support
does
to
that
do our
mean to
jobs.
you when you say,
right?
I want to deal with it at the time?
Because you don't know what the situation is going to be, a different homeowner, right? Someone might post a bond today and they move next year.
Exactly.
So
that was the other-
and then of course the tree's now 10 years older and that's more
Uh-huh.
costly and you're not covering, we don't even cover our costs today when you're talking about inflation. If I
Right.
take money today, but you're talking about the increased size of the tree. So putting the burden today doesn't necessarily solve the problem tomorrow. I'd almost prefer to have a strong policy that gives us the ability to solve the problem tomorrow. But honestly, we need that political support and a really good policy supporting that, but also the financial support, because there is some level of, we don't have a code enforcement officer in the city.
Right.
We really should have code, and not necessarily go out finding people, but to educate people on, hey, I need you to trim your tree. And here's how you can do that properly without hiring an arborist to do it. That's an area where I'd like to get to, where we do a lot more educating, because there was an accident, and did a tree play a role in that accident? Potentially, that a tree overhanging from a park strip could have caused a $60,000 claim that we have, right? Potentially.
But
Now,
could that also happen if, so we're talking about trees, and I feel like we are maybe blurring the lines a little bit. I have lots of trees in my yard. None of them are in the park strip. And somebody else said that. But those trees, because of the way my house faces, that's how you get the most shade on the sidewalk. And so that's just the way, that's just the way my house is. But somebody else, that maybe the trees in the park strip are a better option to provide shade at the hottest time of the day. But I guess I'm just looking at it and thinking.
well, there are studies that's the concrete jungle, right? The asphalt, the heat,
Yeah.
the trees along the park strip do keep down the temperature in the area. There's evidence. When I was in Charlotte and I had an opportunity to, again, love trees, so I took I'm gonna share this for the group as well. I know I shared this before, but in Charlotte, they have this 50% canopy by 2050 goal. And it's a pretty aggressive goal where you can't even remove a tree from your backyard without getting permission from the city. Now, we're not arguing that we want to go to that extent where we're requiring. I mean, it was a cool program though. Each tree had actually a name, and you could write to that tree saying, hey, thanks for the shade you provided today. And somebody would reply back saying, you're welcome, please come back tomorrow. I mean, it's a really neat program, but they invest a ton of money in this, where they have suspended sidewalks. So like downtown Charlotte, they see the importance of having these trees along the street to keep down the temperature. It's that urban jungle we've talked about here, right? Where they're the ones experiencing the global warming and such. But they have this suspended sidewalk where the roots can grow where they need to, but it's a huge cost to build up your sidewalk to have it sitting on a platform so the roots can do their thing. But it's cool. I mean, it's really neat to see what you can do if you have the financial support to do so. And that's a decision for you as a council to decide with all the competing interests we have.
And
needs.
to Brent's point, if you take our $125,000 that we've allocated this year, that's 5.5% of our property taxes. So we have residents that squawk and get really upset about a 3% increase when 5.5% of the budget
is going to
of the property tax. Now, it's not the full budget, but if we're looking at an incremental increase, that would come right out of property taxes. So
yeah,
if you're thinking of an apples to apples comparison, that's something that we have to be thinking.
And that's based on today's dollars. I
That-
mean, I
that-
keep
that-
thinking
that's
about the
today's
fact
dollars,
that
yes,
trees, I mean, these trees that are in there, they're going to continue to grow, right? And they're going to continue to create more problems, and inflation is going to go up. And so what cost is today, I mean, I'm trying to be fiscally responsible too, and also think about, again, sort of looking forward. Like I said, I mean, we need to be thinking too down the road. Brian, I really appreciate your passion for wanting to keep trees in park strips. I mean, for those of you who weren't at the last meeting when we talked about this, every single one of us, if all things were being equal and we didn't have to worry about anything, I think we would all put we've all put trees in park strips. We put trees in a lot of places. What's really where I'm struggling with is trying to balance, like I would love to have trees and park strips all over, but I'm also trying to balance the fiscal side of it. Because I heard a lot of people, and I so appreciate you guys for coming in and bringing your comments. I heard 2 people say that they would personally bear the cost. And I haven't heard anybody saying this is how much more I want to pay in taxes to support this. And I'm really sensitive to that too. I know that we have people who live on fixed income.
And one thing that I could give you, I really, really liked one of Joy's suggestions in her email that is proactive. It's thinking towards the future. And that is, if you don't have a tree that's yet causing a problem, I know that staff they're not seeking out trees just to take down trees. They're trying to address them as problems arise. What Joy suggested is, let's do a proactive tree voucher program now, so that if a resident says, you know what, I do have street trees, I love them, but I know at some point it's got to go. Let's get them planted now, so that in the future, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, when that park strip tree becomes a problem, the tree that we planted now is already 5, 10.
You're talking
15
back
years
from the side.
Back of the
back
sidewalk.
to the sidewalk.
Yeah.
But I'm saying 5, 10, 15 years from now,
I like
that
that.
tree has already started
I-
to grow. And I'm supportive of that from a financial standpoint. Let's get that tree voucher program going and get to those homeowners now so that they can plant them behind the sidewalk in advance of the potential of their tree being removed at some point, if they so choose under a waiver liability program.
I'd also like to see that perhaps, we've heard a lot about 1825 North. The other suggestion I make with this voucher program is, so we didn't have the voucher program for 1825 North, if
No.
I'm correct. I mean, can we just go back and like have some vouchers for 1825?
That's what I think.
Or
I mean,
any
let's do
other
it.
streets
So how many
that have
trees got taken out, Mark?
On 1825? Lots.
So is lots
additionally-
20, 30, 40,
Probably
50?
20.
So
Okay.
like, okay, we're giving $200 vouchers. I'm
I'd also-
supportive of $4,000
I'd also like to
to
see
replace those.
if a property owner chose not to take advantage of the voucher, can't we just leave some vouchers in the neighborhood and say, this street, here's the trees. If somebody doesn't take their voucher, can another neighbor come and
And I
at
love
some
that
point
idea.
in time? I mean, the idea is to keep trees in all the neighborhoods, right? Like, I know we talked a little bit last time about putting them in the parks, but I think we ought to have trees in the parks, as many as we can, but also, I think it's important to keep the neighborhoods with trees. And so I'd like to see that voucher program maybe be expanded a little bit.
But even as we've removed the trees on the projects, we removed 19 trees and they only requested 9
But
vouchers.
would other neighbors come and take those vouchers and say, oh, you know,
Possibly.
this person doesn't want,
I'll take them
doesn't want to, I
Yeah.
know, right? Me too.
10 vouchers were not claimed in
Right.
your
10
neighborhood.
So,
I'll
so
take one.
10 neighbors
Yeah.
can come in and
Yeah,
get,
from our trees.
get
Yeah,
a-
exactly.
run
You guys
another
have the letter in front of you that's provided to the resident.
Correct, which is a great letter.
Yeah, it's a
And
great
so we
letter.
could modify that somewhat.
You know,
I don't know. I'd like to find
So
some
I'm trying to
solutions, but
find that,
yeah,
like,
let's,
that balance.
can I
So-
offer another possible, I think it was Dan Chambers, I'm sorry if I
Yep,
misattributed this.
Dan did, he talked about
Um,
that waiver.
Who suggested he suggested we need to find a middle ground. And I really like that suggestion because I've been so struggling with this issue. I understand where staff is coming from. I get why you guys making that proposal. I also understand why residents are coming out and saying, please don't take my trees. And so I'm trying to figure out where we strike that balance. Two thoughts as I was thinking about this middle ground balance. I heard a lot of comments about we either can have trees in our park strips or we can have rocks, right? And it seems like that's an either or, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily true. When I went out to look at the Balsam home yesterday, just across the street, there was a woman who had planted in her park strip. I mean, it's beautiful. I actually took pictures.
So do you want
It-
Jennifer to pull up my
Did-
River
oh, did
Basin
you-
Water
did you go pull this?
Conservancy PDF?
It was beautiful. It had like bushes and it had lovely succulents and it had some really lovely native plants. And I thought, okay, that's clearly a middle ground. So I'm not quite convinced that it's either trees or rock.
Correct, and so in advance of tonight, I mean, Weaver Basin has some suggestions, so just
at
flip
you.
down for, yeah.
You were reading my mind. Apparently you were
So,
way ahead
so
of me.
this is a great alternative, that middle ground. That, again, we live in a desert. I know one of our residents came from California and fantastic. In some parts of California, you don't have to have irrigation systems. In Pennsylvania, you don't have a sprinkler system. But in Utah, we live in a desert. And so we need to be conscientious, both of the shade, but as well as some conservation. So, and that's good, Jennifer. I
You
was-
came
mine
far
was
more
more-
prepared.
Mine was more eye
Far more
candy, that there is a middle ground and we want to encourage this as well as getting, so we have really aesthetically pleasing park strips, but let's, in the future, as we move down the road, as we talk about what do we look like 30, 40 years down the road, let's get those trees planted now. That's why I love Joy's suggestion. Like, let's get ahead of this and be
well, it really
proactive.
does match what the mayor talked about, that he didn't quite pull out all of his, was it cottonwood?
Yeah.
He didn't quite pull out all of them because he
maple.
was letting the other trees grow up. That's a very,
Yeah.
I mean, Seems
I
like they-
had 2 points, wait. before-
Sorry,
Let me-
sorry,
let me
Shannon, I
finish my
hijacked
second
that
point.
with-
No, I tried.
Because I knew what you were thinking.
I know, I tried to give the 2 points part, right? So my first comment is sort of like, I do think that there is middle ground approach, and I think sometimes that we forget that. But with regard to trees, when I was looking at, when I went out to the Balsam House, the trees that were cut down were these honey locusts. And Mark, I mean, that's challenging for that homeowner. I mean, I would not be happy with that if I were them as well. But I think somebody else mentioned, like, that is not the kind of tree that we should be planting in park strips, right? I mean, I can see that. You just go walk by that property and you go, this should never have been in this park strip because of what the root system did. And so it made me wonder, in terms of that compromise, where can we find that balance? And I'd be really interested to hear your response to this. What if we do focus, like, again, sort of trying to keep the trees balance versus the cost balance, really focusing on the trees that the tree board has identified that are okay for that park strip, recognizing that some trees are going to cause damage, but that maybe if we can keep them to the trees that cause lesser damage, that's great. And then as we're going through and doing these roads projects, rather than pulling out every tree with the assumption that every tree is going to be a problem, maybe we only pull out the trees that are the existing trees that are not one of these trees that are on the list, right? So that we're going to be pulling out the honey locusts, the ones that we know are going to create problems. But if we have some other tree that is on that approved tree list, we'll say, we're not going to automatically rip that out. I mean, what I'm curious as to your thought about that sort of compromise position.
So I don't mind that position, but this is the issue we run into. 4 or 5 years ago, we overlaid 1750 North between Main Street and 1800 North. There's 23 trees on the street. If you went and walked it tomorrow, anybody can see that 16 of those trees need to come out for ADA compliance. There's actually somebody that lives on 1800 North in a wheelchair that could benefit from that sidewalk being fixed. Now, the other trees could stay, but how long? And then what's the cost down the road?
So that goes to Brant's. That goes to your are you still there, right? Do we then pay for, do we code enforce to try to get the homeowners to fix the trees, or do we pay for somebody to go around and fix them?
So I've been kind of quiet. I've been doing the tree thing for a long time. I've been on the council for 9 years. I'm very much a tree lover. When I first started, I was crusading for the trees in the park strip. I was part of the council that came up with the tree board. We have some excellent arborists on our tree board along with citizens. So we got both professional and non-professional. Over the years, I've sat on, I can't tell you how many meetings on the trees. I think we need to remember that we're not trying to take all the trees down. We're talking about the park strip. So I agree when everybody says all the trees benefit us, that, you know, the tree is going to benefit me as much on one side of the sidewalk as it does on the other. But I also have been tutored by many people that the park strips were actually made for a highway for our infrastructure. Our old public works guy had a tree that he brought in, was off of 1825. They literally had to go to a front yard and cut the roots here, the roots here, and then we had to pay to have new water pipes put in, new gas pipes put in. Everything that went through there was all entangled in these roots so badly that they had to cut them off. So if we're looking forward to the future, then maybe we need to think about this, because if they'd have thought about that back then and those trees hadn't been there, it would have saved us a lot of money. Now, saying that, I think there's some middle ground. I think if you already have trees there and they're not causing any damage, then I think maybe we ought to be able to have an option of you looking at, you know, if they're not damaging the sidewalk, maybe we can do something. If we know they're going to damage the sidewalk, because so I just planted my tree, you know, 2 years ago, and then they come through and that they don't take my tree down because it's not damaging the sidewalk, but give it another 5 years. So I've been on the other side of this. I moved up to North Centerville. I put 4 beautiful trees in front of my house as soon as I moved in. Within 2 weeks, so the city's obviously gone up and down. This was in 1983, so you know I'm old. It was actually the guy that ran the parks department came to my front door and said, "You have 2 weeks to get those trees down, or we'll take them down and we'll charge you for it." Well, I was on a pretty tight budget, so my husband got out and got those trees dug up and put somewhere else. Then I moved up here into the older part of Centerville, and I own the house next door to me, and my husband came in and he goes, the tree over there, gorgeous tree." Now knowing what I know now, I'm very sorry I took it down, but it started to raise the sidewalk. And I thought, I don't want to have to pay to take that tree down and fix the sidewalk. So I paid $500 and had the tree taken down. So I've been on both sides of it. I can see both sides. I think there's middle ground. I'd like to work with the people that have trees. If you want to keep the trees and you're willing to do something financially in order to help us with the sidewalks, we can only grind the sidewalks a couple of times, and then they're too thin, so we've got to do new ones. And Mark's right, we come in and put a new sidewalk in, and you'd be surprised, 2 or 3 years, those sidewalk roots are coming back up and popping our new sidewalks. So I've been on the council not too long after I was on there. We got in trouble with our insurance, Irma, for somebody who'd fallen on the sidewalk, and we were liable. So that's when they came in and said, you've got to do something with your sidewalks. That's why you see all the yellow lines. We had a gal come in and walk all of Centerville and spray yellow lines, because that helps to mitigate our liability, because we are trying to, because we don't have millions of dollars. And literally what people don't understand is it isn't $100,000 a year. If we were going to go fix every sidewalk that a tree has raised in Centerville, am I wrong, Mark? But we'd be well over $1 million.
Yeah.
Probably closer to 2 million at least.
Based on 10,000 differential cracks,
Right.
you're talking about $4 million.
Yeah. So we don't, so when we say 100,000, we're not saying to you guys, it's 100,000 a year, we can take care of them. We're not taking care of them. We've only taken care of 2 miles out of 95 miles of raised sidewalks. But I do agree that if you already have a tree there and it's not bothering, or you're willing to be financially responsible, which I'm a responsible person and I thought I was responsible, so I cut the tree down so I didn't have to pay for the sidewalk. But everybody's not. I've ridden with the snowplow drivers. I really like to I really like to bug all the staff, so I just go right out and work with them. And you know what? Their mirrors are hitting the trees that are hanging over the sidewalk. I worked for the post office for 25 years. Can't tell you how many mirrors we lost on our postal jeeps for the trees hanging over the sidewalks. I'm a crossing guard. Can I tell you how many kids on a bicycle have gotten hit because they don't keep the trees trimmed up high enough? And so as they grow out bushy over the sidewalk.
How many?
How many?
Kids, yeah.
Probably in the years I've done it, I've had 5 or 6 that have been injured doing
By
that.
a tree's limb hanging over a sidewalk.
Yeah, because they're
down by the-
riding their bicycles and they're getting scratched, or if you ride around, you'll see a lot. So Mark just took a tree down for me. It was dead just this week because you couldn't see my crossing guard lights, because it was in the Parkstrip along Main Street by the junior high. And I had 3 people call me the first day of school and say, Robin, I can't see your crossing guard lights.
Who was one of those people?
And Spencer Summerhays was one of those people that called me and said, can't see your lights. And so I called, actually I made the police chief call Mark because I call him too much, and ask him if he'd please, work on these trees because they've grown over. There was no way that you could see my crossing guard lights, which was dangerous for me and the kids. So I would really like to see us work together, that we can work with you guys and save the trees that are there that aren't causing trouble. We all love trees. We have a great arborist here that would tell you that trees that are planted in a 4-foot park strip aren't usually healthy, good trees, but that's not really enough area for a tree to grow. I don't want to raise the taxes. I have a lot of elderly people that come to me pleading with me not to raise taxes because they can't afford it anymore. I don't want those. And I probably would say from driving around, maybe 80% of the people don't have trees in their park strip. I hate for them to have to pay for the ones that do. But I'm willing, if you're willing to pay for the trees in your park strip, and we can figure out a way it will work, that we can work with you so that if you have trees there, you can keep the trees in your park strip. Now, if you've got a tree in your park strip that's got a ledge this big, we're probably not gonna be, I mean, that's like Mark says, we can cut the roots and put in a new sidewalk. But then your tree's gonna die and blow over in the east wind and it's gonna be a really big mess. So I'm willing to work with the people that have trees that aren't damaged. I really want to find a middle ground to where we can help those that have them. But I do think with our infrastructure, not only are we paying for the sidewalks, we're paying for the infrastructure underneath the sidewalks that's being damaged too. So I want you to be aware that I think everybody on this council loves trees. And we're all very much property rights people, and we want to give you the rights. You can have all the trees you want in your yard. I'm 100%. In fact, I called Gina and said to her, we need to keep the trees, because I was concerned when they said, we'll plant more trees in the parks. I'm like, well, that's stupid. That isn't doing any good in a neighborhood if we plant a tree down in Community Park and we took them all down up here in the old part of Centerville. So I said, let's give them vouchers. If all the vouchers aren't used for that neighborhood, let's give the people in the neighborhood vouchers so that we can get those same amount of trees back in, and maybe even throw in a couple more vouchers. So if we pull down 12 trees, maybe we can do 14 new trees in the neighborhood so that we're keeping the trees in the neighborhood. We do need them. They do a ton of benefit for all of us. I'm a walker. I love to walk on Second East over here, and they've got all kinds of big trees, but luckily they don't have any sidewalks. So they're big trees. But on 1825 North, most of the people were glad to have their trees taken down because the city took them down and paid for it. And I don't believe one of them has replanted a new tree. If you go talk to them, they were like, we're tired of taking care of them. We don't want them. And that makes me sad too. I don't want to take these trees down and not have them replaced. So I'm willing to let your neighbor replace it if you don't want to have to deal with the tree any longer. But I also would like to be able to find a way that if you have a tree that you're particularly fond of, I have one in my backyard that I can't tell you what I do to protect it, that we can work with you. Being realistic that if you have huge, I mean, if they're damaging the sidewalk, you've got to be willing to work with the city and have them and understand that we're doing all we can do to try and keep the trees.
Great input. Now, we've all had a chance to talk. We're getting on almost 10 o'clock here, okay? So does this ordinance and the 3 amendments in the ordinance cover what you're talking about, Robin?
Well, where I was gonna go, Mayor, is if we're gonna craft a motion, we may need to have a motion that would have some conditions or some commentary narrative to instruct staff.
I was gonna say, I think that's what we need to do.
Right, that's why I just brought up what I did, because I don't know that from what I'm hearing, that this ordinance fits what we've been discussing.
No.
In the 3 amendments.
And that was what I was gonna get at, is that even if you crafted a motion with some of these caveats, is that really a good motion?
No, I think staff needs to go back.
I think staff needs to go back in knowing how we feel and how the people feel, that we need to give direction to staff to.
But I think I know I don't want to have staff spend any more time than they need to, but I do think we need to understand what that costs. And I know that's not the only thing, but when we talk about, Spencer brought it up and I can't quit thinking about it, the 125,000 and what percentage that is of property tax. You know, we're not funding our streets. I mean, Mark, if we get 150 years out of a street, you are going to have a job in every city in America, because really engineers plan for about 100 years, and we're not funding our streets to even replace them at 100 years. So I think it's important to realize, like, yes, let's talk about it and get it figured out, but also just realize we are not really, when we talk about what we're leaving for our children and grandchildren, right now, we're not leaving them, we're not replacing the streets. That's just one example. So I think it's important. I want to understand the cost better of whatever
Yeah,
that
because
is.
we're
And
not
I
gonna have
agree
it.
with
For
you.
example, this is what Brant's talking about. I mean, this is a side tangent, but it relates to
It's
this.
just the same topic,
What does
right?
what cost?
At what cost?
Correct.
What cost do you want?
Well,
What
and
cost?
but there's a difference
If
in
we're
the cost if
leaving,
What we're asking
What-
for is, we really would like you to craft a motion to give us really clear direction, because maybe not all of you are on the same.
I'm not
and I don't know
So
what
there's,
cost you're
there's
talking.
about 10 different things that, I have notes up here that.
So Mark, can I ask
I
one
would
quick
like to see.
question? Outside of 1825 North, what other recent street projects have we completed or are in process for which tree vouchers could have or are being provided?
Tree vouchers are being provided for Briarwood and 1250 North right now. 1250 North is between Deerfield and 325 East.
Okay, because I don't want to just focus only on 1825. It should extend to all
Right,
the
it
more
should
recent
be-
projects as well.
I've had 2 residents reach out to me in the last week, and
So-
one of them said, "Hey, can you come remove my tree?" Went up, looked at it, said, "Absolutely, we'll remove your tree." Why I was there, I didn't even know they were aware of the tree voucher program. They said, "Can I get a tree voucher?" Absolutely. There's a person on Island View, called me, says, "I've got 4 trees in my park strip. If you remove them, will you give me 4 tree vouchers?" I said, "Absolutely."
Okay, so can I make a really rough motion and have people, let's make sure people have comment and. we can
I'd like
take it
to
from
make
there?
a motion.
Sure,
to
are you
Table this indefinitely.
Are
Does
you-
anybody-
Are you curious to see what his 10 things are, or do you have them in
I
your
would
mind?
like to hear his 10 things, but I'm okay with
Or
the
go
motion
ahead, go
from
ahead.
Spencer.
Who's 10 things?
Brad
Brown.
just
I have
said-
notes, go ahead with your motion.
Oh,
Yeah,
no,
I have
no,
probably my.
Maybe-
notes mixed
maybe
in
it'll
there.
My
help me,
motion
right?
would be to direct staff that we're going to have a proactive tree voucher program that reaches out to existing street tree residents to proactively plant.
That residents can reach out, like we're not going to find them, they're gonna come and,
And I don't,
what do you mean by proactive? That's my
I
question.
don't know yet, so this is why
Okay,
let's.
okay, keep
Again,
going,
this is
sorry.
rough,
Before you
Gina.
I know,
This
it's
is
okay.
What's that?
Some in the Gazette or whatever it is.
Correct,
Somebody
exactly.
has put something in the Gazette about Centerville's tree voucher program. I
Yes.
don't know who, how,
What is
when.
the Gazette?
It's
The-
the
the-
journal.
Oh, the
like
journal.
journal.
Okay,
Good,
okay,
that's, I like the Gazette.
I
though.
like it.
We're going to get that.
What
Somebody's put it
complication
out
am I
there. and
missing?
That's how, where some of this outreach has even came from.
So we can,
I had a conversation with Becky about it.
that's the first component is the proactive tree voucher program. The second component is unused vouchers that have not been previously used where they've been offered. The third one is where maybe the tree voucher program wasn't in place, but we want to go back on some of these. So that's kind of this tree voucher concept in 3 phases.
Wait, sorry, I'm not following. What's your third phase?
The
For-
other streets
like
outside
the
of
streets
1825. So
that have
1825
recently
Briarwood,
been-
1250 North.
Ah, okay.
There's
that-
only
When did
Cottonwood.
this-
Cottonwood was the first tree
Okay,
that we
sorry, I
asked the
didn't have that
residents
one
to
down either.
volunteer to remove all the trees. The
Okay,
one resident didn't want their tree removed. It's still there.
okay. So can, on that, can we just say retroactive to Cottonwood?
Sure.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Okay.
Fourth is the waiver liability release program. And so I'm probably 6 short, I guess, Brant. I don't, what else am I short, council?
Say that last one again, I'm sorry.
Waiver
I-
Waiver
Waiver
liability release
liability.
program. What,
Okay,
there's- I don't know. how
what
that
could
is.
that look like?
So I have a question, Mark, because I think some of, we're missing a little bit of it. If you go to an average street, because you've been doing this a long time, and there's 14 trees on the park strip. If you go to the door and ask to take those trees down, on average, how many do you think are not gonna want their trees taken down?
We've had very few
Very few.
on the projects.
So that's why I'm saying, I don't think this is as big an issue as we're making it. And when we're wanting to look forward to the future, if we just don't plant new trees, then we are helping our kids and our grandkids. Because we're not gonna cause them the sidewalk problems. Once we get them fixed, the sidewalks aren't gonna be near as bad. We're not dealing with the infrastructure problems. If moving forward, we're gonna save the money. I've tried to walk a lot since this has been going on, and I've noticed that a lot of places, if you plant the tree, I get more shade walking on the sidewalk from the tree in their yard than I do in the park strip, especially if we limit them to be so small. They don't really give it, I mean, they're huge. And all these people are responsible, but there's a lot of people out there that plant them, that never trim them again. So we're gonna help the future by encouraging the trees to be planted in the yards. But we're also not attacking the people that already have them in their park strips, as long as they're not causing damage. And if it's an iffy situation and Mark says, look, I've seen these trees, 3 more years, we've got popped ones, then we're gonna make a waiver for them to sign and say, you're not only gonna do your sidewalk, you're gonna pay to cut your tree down too. Because I'm tight enough to know that I would say, okay, never mind, cut my tree down and do my sidewalk if you'll pay for it today, because I don't want to have to pay for it. But if you truly, truly love that tree, you're going to leave that tree there and you're going to pay the price.
So are you proposing no new trees?
Right, but
in
we
park strips
protect the
going
trees that are
forward,
there
but
as best we
grandfather
can.
existing trees
But
under
not
this
all of
waiver
them, just the
program?
ones
And I
that are
think
not
it's
causing
important.
damage.
The intent isn't to remove all the trees from the park strip.
Right.
That's not the intent. And I've made that clear, that we're gonna be methodical about it.
You have.
And that's not the intent. And even when I hear rip the trees out, that's emotional. We're not ripping the trees out, we're relocating the trees. We're providing the voucher to the resident as a betterment when we take out the one that's damaging the infrastructure. So
So are you saying you haven't removed every tree in the park strips?
the last 2 years on the road construction projects, they
You
have been
have.
removed, but we have not removed anything that hasn't been requested.
Okay,
Otherwise,
everyone,
throughout
but
the
everyone
city,
has voluntarily, and
yes,
it's
they
been
voluntarily
100%.
called and said, will you please remove our tree and fix our sidewalk? Absolutely.
Let's continue with Spencer's
Okay,
motion so we
sorry.
can get.
I got the 4,
something
so
down here.
Brent has 6.
Is it a motion anymore?
Yeah. What else?
There's more to it.
I know,
And I think
yes.
it's beyond this, but we developing a code enforcement program or a policy of how do you enforce this and educate the residents. I think, yeah, that's not part of this. So a lot of those things are based on where you go with this. My list is based on where do you want to start, right? So my items will build on. So you just tell me where you want staff to go right now, and then we can have.
What were your other items, Brent, so that I don't miss any the potential that I would make as part of my motion, whether it
You
passes
wouldn't
or
make
not.
any of these part of it. Okay, because it's more staff follow-up.
Those
but
are
it's all
the
based on what
basic
you want.
ones that I've got. I don't know if anybody wants to add to it.
I had made a proposal that with regards to only for the streets that we're doing the street repairs on, to your point, Mark, right? This is not like just walk around the streets and find random
Correct. We're
trees,
not
right?
seeking
I'm
out.
only talking
Yeah.
about when we're gonna get ready to redo a street.
Correct.
Look at that street and say, if it's an existing tree that is not on the approved tree list. I mean, I think I might be inclined just to, even if it's not currently causing, I don't know.
problem
If it's
is
not
then-
currently causing a problem, because it will,
It will,
right? Like if it's
exactly.
not on the tree list, I
That's
think it
assuming,
will.
you're assuming that's gonna cause problems.
Yeah, no, I am making that
Some that they
assumption.
know, like
But
That's not true.
But I am
You're
trying to-
saying you couldn't predict the future and you're
But-
trying to predict the future. I can predict the future. I can predict the future when I plant a tree. There's gonna be a tree there in 30 years. That's predicting the future. You can't
Wait,
predict the
that's- you
future
can't
whether you.
predict that. I just lost
So,
a tree in a windstorm.
well, please, let's stick with the
Yeah,
motion.
so I.
If you want to add something to it, Councilman
I want to
Summerhays.
make a motion. to
Summerhays,
table this
let me
indefinitely.
finish, Brian. So Councilman Summerhays has just said that you
Thank you,
can
Mayor.
add something to it.
Yeah, so I would suggest we add Shaylin's friendly amendment number 5, that this is a program that we implement as we're doing street projects, because that's what we're, it's an infrastructure issue, to your point. It's not just a sidewalk issue, it's a general infrastructure issue. So that's my general motion. If somebody wants to second it, that's great.
I'll second it.
Can I clarify?
Yes, thank you,
So-
please, yes.
really your first four were just on the tree voucher program. So what is your
Well,
affirmative
the
direction?
first three were tree voucher. The fourth one was that waiver liability release. Just take a look at that, kind of that program.
I also heard no new trees, but grandfather in. existing
Yes, no,
trees.
but you haven't really addressed
No.
the question. So right now the code says no trees unless you have a 6-foot park strip. So what are you directing staff to change there? Do you
No.
want?
I didn't even hear
We're not-
accepting the order.
We're just grandfathering
Not-
the ones that are in.
Yeah.
If they're not causing
Correct.
damage.
So leave that
it would
in. So
stand.
you do like Robin. So
Yes,
no new trees in the park strip, number 6.
correct.
And then leave the existing one alone if it's not
If
causing
it's not
damage.
causing damage, no.
Okay, that was Robin's
Yep.
7.
But are we doing that or are we, I thought Shaylin mentioned
Unless,
that it's on,
unless it's
because
part
it's
of
on the list.
Right, I would say leave it alone. I mean, this is, you can, it's your motion.
Yeah.
But I would say, and to Brian's point, I know I am making a judgment call here. I'm trying to make something that I think is.
you
is a
don't know it, but it's
compromise.
a probable.
Right, so if it's,
Or
so
plain
leave it,
probability, not certain.
pull it out if it's, if we're doing an existing roads project, pull it out if the existing tree is not on the list. And if the tree is on the list, don't touch it if it's not causing any problems and.
But
get
what if
a
it's
waiver.
not causing
Thank
any
you for
problems
putting
and it's been there for 20 years? I mean, I had a couple of people here that talked to me tonight that said, I've had a tree for 25 years. It's pretty much full grown.
So
And it has
Robin, that gets into that
absolutely
waiver
nothing.
liability release program, right? That's, in my mind, that kind of falls under that little
Well,
small
isn't anything
umbrella.
that's staying in when he does the road replacement, isn't that falling under that waiver liability?
Let me just, again, I think we're going we're really into the mechanics here. I can get you to sign a waiver today, but you're moving tomorrow and nobody's notifying you you just moved other than changing water surface, right? So you might sign the waiver, but the next person will not.
You
And when you're
can't
talking
put
about a
that with the
proactive
house.
voucher program, it's a great idea, but you might agree to remove your
Except for
tree
you-
5 years
yeah,
from now.
To,
but the next
to
person
Robin's
doesn't.
point, it could be just a recorded instrument.
Can it be recorded with the house?
Yeah.
The ADU stuff was
Now we're
that, I
getting-
mean,
We're getting
so-
into real property rights here.
So,
But you don't
But
have,
it's not the individual's property.
So I guess what we're saying, so we have our current ordinance, and we talked about voucher program. I think that's a build on what you brought are great points to bring up to expand and again, protect the canopy of the city, right? I think those are great motions, but again, the motion or the ordinance before you, are we, and just keep it simple, are we allowing trees in a park strip of less than 4 feet?
not new ones.
Say only if it's grandfathered and it's not causing problems. That's what I heard, right? I wouldn't argue that it doesn't matter the species, even if it's not on the approved list. it
Well, so
shouldn't.
far the motion is only with street.
Right. Well, that's what I mean.
Okay.
Sorry, regarding street projects, right?
correct.
So is that the only change we're talking about in the existing ordinance right
I
now?
don't have a vote here, but I don't like no new trees in the park strip. I like approved
That's the point of this.
approved trees in the park
Well, I
strip.
think
Right,
that's
Mayor,
what
that's
we're
what I'm
trying to
asking.
Taking the
clarify,
mayor's-
Yeah,
right?
that's exactly what I'm trying to get at, Mayor. So that was the
Yeah.
first step of what we're looking at the ordinance. Now,
We need to.
now are we allowing, if you're, because you all have different ideas of how you want to approach this. And as staff, I'm just telling you, I don't have clear direction of what you want from us right now. We're
Okay.
happy to go whatever direction you
Yeah,
want,
Robin, you're saying no new trees based on.
but simplify your motion
I'm
exactly
okay if
what's.
the council really
front of you.
wants to put trees in the park strip. I just know that we already have approved trees on our website. We don't have enough staff to go out and check every time a tree is planted.
We do have a tree board, and the tree board could take that task on.
They're volunteers. Are they really gonna go check every tree?
I guess that's something that we can talk about, but, I mean, what people are talking about, 70% of the people don't have trees in their parking strips, but, there's lots of people that don't have kids and we still pay taxes to the school district. So that's really moot. I think that we just need to we don't want to be the first city to do this when we haven't done the study to see like Joy said, what is the ramification in 30 years when we don't have any trees in our parking strips? We don't understand that. And we don't even know if utilities will be the same in 30 years. they could be different. There could be a totally different
Well, this isn't a-
technology involved. And so that's assuming, yes,
This
I
isn't a
am.
forever thing. I
We-
mean, there's a new council every year.
We,
every 2
we,
years
we,
that
we, we need
changes.
to stay on task here. We need to stay with this motion. We had a motion, and we actually had a second. Were you gonna,
Do you
were you
want me to
changing?
repeat what I have?
Were you
Yes,
changing the motion now?
Yes,
Do you wanna?
it's gotten messy.
But I'm
It's
now
gotten
not
messy,
clear, Spencer,
'cause
was
I
your
don't know
motion
what
trees in the
seconded.
park
I think it's
strip
gotten messy, so
after or grandfather?
Let me repeat what
thank
what
you,
I've heard.
Lisa.
Thank you.
So the motion is to direct staff to implement a few new provisions in the code. Number one, implement a proactive tree voucher program. With existing street tree residents. Number two, allow distribution of the unused vouchers to others if they're not used. So we're doing a tree for a tree. Go back and offer prior streets retroactive to Cottonwood, the tree voucher program. That would likely be tree for a tree. If you want us to implement
Yes,
that.
that's
So we've
correct.
got 20 tree vouchers for 1825 North or anybody within whatever distance staff
Yes.
wants to describe.
Yep.
Implement a waiver liability release program. If someone wants to keep their tree. No new trees in the park strips moving forward, but leave existing trees alone if they're not causing damage, and leave existing trees alone if they're on the approved tree list.
No, I can't make the motion, but the reason you would do a waiver of liability is any trees that are already there or any future trees. that
Yeah, and I
would-
think that's
would
the
in.
distinguishing factor is the council needs to, if we want to debate my motion, that would be the point of debate. Mayor. That's a good point, because it is the waiver liability release program only for existing trees? Or is it both for existing? And if I want to take the risk and plant a new tree, subject to it being on the approved tree list, I can also sign that waiver liability, and I could get behind that. as well.
I could get behind that.
Okay,
But what are we gonna do?
Does
to
that make sense, what I
enforce
just
that?
said?
Yeah, it does, but I'm still a little baffled because I think staff is saying, we don't know how to make the waiver liability.
I understand that.
Yeah,
work.
I don't think it's gonna be your panacea.
Well,
Yeah.
What I would love to see is staff come up with a recommendation for us, like to look at this issue and come back to us with a recommendation. Is a waiver liability release program workable? Should we do a bond? If we want to do this, how else? Like, I really want to know how we're gonna pay for this.
well, we're not voting on this motion right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think the motion is. to
We're
direct
giving them a
staff.
motion.
So if we want to direct.
We're giving
staff to
them motion
research
for
these
direction
things,
to the staff.
That's my motion.
Right, that's why, but you.
But
yeah.
but what Shaylin is saying, the staff has got to know what to bring back to
Right.
us.
Correct.
That's why. I'm
And I
trying to
don't-
say,
I don't
wouldn't
think that's
limit it to
clear
just
yet.
Liability waiver.
Or anything else we can, yeah, other recommendations
Other
that staff
recommendations.
wants to
I am
present based upon
Yes.
public.
I don't
comment.
know that any of us know what the waiver of liability looks like right now without researching.
I think for me, at least, I have an idea based on the conversation with council as well as residents and understanding staff's position. I think I have a pretty idea of how we can approach bring a recommendation forward.
Okay.
I just wanted some motion of some sort, so we're not spinning our
So
wheels and we're
this
coming
is my
back. and
general
be like,
motion.
You're
Do
way
I have a
off.
second?
But I think I have a more clear understanding that
Do you need a formal motion or are we good?
we're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll second
I
it.
don't need, Jennifer,
Yeah, I think.
Well,
she
you would need
I
at least a
second.
motion to table it
Yes,
and
we
determine
need at
whether
least
you're
that.
Yeah, and I
continuing the
was gonna
public
say-
hearing.
Okay. Are
If
we
you're withdrawing your
continuing the
motion.
public hearing?
No, I'm not gonna withdraw my.
Well, we have a motion a second, so either we need
Yeah,
to
we'll
vote
on
or,
that.
or withdraw.
But I think the
Correct, Lisa?
motion, Mayor, I think the motion is the notion that we're directing staff and therefore it is taken. It's not, we're not voting on the actual ordinance itself.
Right, we're not bringing up ordinance number
But I think you could amend your
2024-12.
motion to say, we're going to table these ordinances.
Yes.
So that we can spend further time
As directed by staff.
investigating the
Yes,
6 points.
that's exactly right.
Table and direct staff.
Yep.
to-
So I believe I have.
And I can second that.
A third, I guess.
So a motion a second, let's vote. Councilwoman Macon.
Aye.
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 Okay, good. Did anybody bring ice cream? Because we're getting hungry up there. Thank you, everybody.
Now, what are
You're
we-
welcome to stay, but we're not
we haven't-
discussing trees anymore.
We closed the
Oh my
public
gosh, yeah,
hearing,
no,
we're not
this was a
reopening
good,
it.
this was a really good
No.
discussion.
And when
We're
are
not
we
ready
just,
for right
when
now.
are we discussing this
No.
again?
You can
I
sit
agree.
up.
I was trying to
They
come up
can-
with like a middle ground.
If I fix my sidewalks because
And
they're
I'm
balding,
not actually
Oh,
necessarily.
yeah.
my
opposed
trees
to
alone?
trees and park strips. But I
We'll
need
let
to
them
figure
come
out
back.
how we're gonna fund it.
Probably just depends on when the street
told my
gets, because it's
personal-
only when the
The problem is
street
if you fix your
constructed.
sidewalk that are bulging and then the trees ruin them again, that's the problem with this, right?
I do, but I'm
and
like,
then people are
I,
gonna say, well, keep the trees,
This is what I was gonna say.
and I'm willing to pay the expense.
Mayor, can we
That's
have a
what we're
5-minute break?
Sure, 5 minute break. That's, yeah, 5 minute break. That's why we're trying to do, some sort of waiver of liability, right?
Well, I know.
Because if you sign something like
My heart
Did,
just
did
hurts
you
for those
record all the
people.
noise, Jennifer? Let's go. We're cruising through. Item number 2, fee schedule amendment. Mike, get up here.
Run.
Run.
And hurry up.
We're counting on you being half asleep. So
And
you'll
did
be
you hear
half
the mayor say?
present.
Getting a little tired. I can't do this
Did you hear
anymore.
the mayor said you're limited to 2.5
Sorry
minutes?
to everyone on staff that wants to go home and
We're
see
good.
their family.
All right, let's
Amy will be
go.
here. I'm fine.
All right, so
Take it off your Friday.
you want me to just go ahead and share this out? Okay.
Yes.
So what I provided to you, we had on July 8th, a letter come from our county recorder's office regarding 8 internal ADUs. And there's been an upswing in Davis County, as you can see in the letter. So in response to that, Jennifer and I talked about it. We looked at it from a recorder perspective as well, staff time. And the current fee right now is $150 in the fee schedule. So we're just trying to match that recording requirement of $40 and then add $10 staff time, where we feel like the fee that's currently in there probably isn't really capturing the staff time that's put in. We put in about 3+ hours on these, I would say, between our efforts and what Jennifer does. So that's why the recommendation is such that we raise that from $150 to $200. And I guess if there's further questions, feel free to let me know, but that's long and short of it.
Questions for Mike on that one?
Nobody dares speak.
I'll make the motion if we're ready.
Yeah, if there's
I'll
no
make-
question for Mike, then we got a motion on this resolution number 2024-20.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution number 24-20, amending section 20.084 of the Centerville fee schedule to increase the application fee for internal accessory dwelling units from $150 to $200.
Second.
Motion is second. Let's do a roll call vote. Councilman Summerhead's going to do the right.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passed unanimously. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mike. All right, let's go to summary action. We just have one item on summary action. This is Public Works equipment purchase, Water Department backfill. Our other Mike has stayed awake too, if you have any questions for him on it. Well, maybe we woke back up, I think. So any questions for Mike on this purchase?
Mike, I did have one quick question for you. So the decision was to do a trade-in as opposed to a sell. Just walk us through that decision.
Yeah, we trade them out with reader machinery at
Okay.
our best deal.
Okay.
We kind of messed up. We should have added, it should have been 24,300 this year. Or should have been in the budget. We think we'll still be okay.
Okay.
As far, well, we think the truck sales will come in higher, we're hoping, so we're hoping everything will balance out. We'll be fine. So,
I'll make a motion that we approve the trade-in of the new backfill for the water department in the total amount of $24,300.
Second.
Motion is second. Let's do a roll call vote, starting to my left, going right.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passed unanimously. Okay, we're going to minutes. These are minutes of 2 weeks ago. Our work session and our city council. Do you have drafts in front of you? Do you have any problems with any of them? Anything you want fixed on them?
There was a double period somewhere, on the work session, line 40, page 1,
Okay,
there's a double period there.
want to fix
Oh,
that
yeah.
double period, Jennifer? But then, did you have one too?
No, I just noticed it. I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as amended by Shaylin.
Second.
Well, motion to second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Okay, we have the Centerville City financial report in front of you from Nate. It is July, so that's not a quarter ending month, but he's still here. If you have any questions on it, if not, it's there for your information. Anybody have any questions, concerns they wanted to ask Nate about on that?
Not on this, but Nate, remind us, when do we get like our closed out fiscal year end statements, or have we got those? And okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nate, for preparing those. Welcome back. 2, 3 children? Awesome. Well, congratulations.
Awesome. Congrats.
So awesome. All right, let's go to council report. It's Council Member Summerhays.
Not much to report on the South Davis Rec Center. We'll be starting that budget process next month. Again, that one's an actual calendar year budget process. We've implemented a pretty strict and thorough cost code accounting so that we can track expenses and revenues better program by program to make sure that as we make decisions moving forward and or analyzing programs that we're kind of having that financial eye towards it, as opposed to, it's great to be able to provide recreation to the public, but there needs to be a basis on which to make decisions. It doesn't have to be all financially related, but that's obviously a component of it. So that's going on. We do have, I think I reported, we do have our 2 new board members, Brett Stedman and John Norman, who are citizen appointed through the elected officials. They're serving on the board now as well. Trails Committee, I think they're just anxious to start working with Mike and his team, the SOMA's team, on any way they can as it relates to the trails portion of the master plan, general plan components. And looking forward to that. So really, that's all I've got.
Thank you, Councilmember Summer. Is anything from any of you with your committees expressing that we need to know about?
I might just make you aware of a situation at the sewer district, just so if any residents reach out. Several months back, the Board of Trustees reviewed and analyzed the ADU. How do you charge for sewer connection? It was decided that internal ADUs would qualify for a second sewer connection fee. We did have just recently some complaints about that from one of the communities. The way that they're doing that is the sewer district is reaching out to each city and asking for the ADUs.
So an actual sewer connection fee, not a usage fee.
A usage fee, not the connection fee.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize.
I was gonna say, how can they do that?
I apologize. I said that
That's
wrong. Anyway, the district has just said, hey, if you've gone to so one of the arguments was, well, it's my kids living in the basement, or it's my family member. And the intent of it was, if you've gone and created an internal ADU that meets our city standards, that is, all the things that we agreed to, that's just the way that the district's gonna do it.
Because the potential is there to have 2 family units.
But the
Yes.
problem, I disagree with that because, I had all of my children there. So if I had 2 people live in the basement or,
we
you
can
really
argue
don't
this
have more
whole
people,
point.
but.
Yeah, we can argue this whole point all, like, obviously there's of course many reasons why you would or would not, but what about the one sewer connection going into an apartment building that is 30 units? So
Right, but
we had
that's
to
not
make
an
a
ADU.
decision. There is a form that you can fill out asking for an exemption if you feel like, there are instances where somebody maybe is like, well, my kid is just living there for 6 months, or so there's a form you can fill out. That's the part I want you to be aware of, that if somebody does have an issue with that.
Is it a lot of money? How much is it?
Well, it's the sewer fee. So whatever you pay,
But
130.
wouldn't it only be part of that if it's not a connection and it's only the fee?
It's
the
the
whole
full
thing.
amount. So it's double. If you have an ADU in your basement, obviously we only have internal ADUs in this
Right.
community. So I'm just passing it along.
Okay. I'll be quiet.
No, I'm just saying, like, if you want to complain about it, please come and do so, like we've already. It was a hard decision to make, but my opinion on it was, and the reason I voted this way is, if your intent is to create an ADU, you're probably renting it out. If it's your kid, I don't know that I'd be doing that for my kid.
Probably wouldn't be renting it out.
So that's where that came from. But like I said, there is a form you can fill out. So that's the important thing I wanted you to understand, is that this community felt like they were not aware of that. So I want to just make sure everybody knows.
All 6 of us are gonna show up to help with you. Okay?
Okay, that's great. I look forward to it.
All right.
Can
Thank
I
you.
say something, Mayor, really quick?
Sure.
the Centerville Civilian Corps, the CCC, the board, the chairman, Kelly Sharp, has identified something that he's concerned about. He's concerned that right now the city has got a bilateral agreement with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's served well in the past, but moving forward, he's felt that this is not something that is going to reach out to everybody in the community. So I was hoping that perhaps we could put that on a work session agenda in the near future, being that it's dealing with emergency planning. It might be something we want to address sooner rather than later, as he is identified that there's just some gaps in this agreement that other entities and individuals may not be getting notified properly in an emergency situation.
And thanks for bringing it up. We can have Brent make a note, put that on future work session, but could he get us comments of and information that would help us out?
Yes.
I will share. So Chief Former and Chief Current, we've had this conversation about this agreement. So I'll get with Chief and also say, okay, and have the internal discussion first. But yeah, some concern of ours as well. So we'll put some things together. I'll put it on our schedule to meet to discuss. And then once we have something of recommendation, we'll bring that.
Thank you, Councilman Plummer, for being on it, and thanks, Brad, for being on top of it as well. So, all right, wonderful. I'll just report this. We received some resumes for the new chief. We'll be, as a board, and Brent's on that committee as well too, because he's chair of the admin committee, looking to see if we can get a new fire chief hired. I just want to point out to everybody, please remember that September 7th, Saturday, September 7th in the morning is the 911 service day. And you can look at Just Serve at projects you might want to get involved in and help out on. They're doing a first responder, similar to what they did last year, first responder thing at 8 o'clock on the Bowery, Smith Bowery, Friday morning at 8 a.m. And then they're going around to the schools with their trucks again and whatnot. That was really loved by the kids last year. You could probably miss the first half hour because I'm speaking for a few minutes and you can just skip to the stuff after that. So
We're gonna be there.
And then also on the 7th is preparedness fair. It'll be going on down at the Megaplex as well too. So we got a lot on the 7th. We got to get all that in before the Utah versus Baylor game at 1:30 that day. So
Go Utes.
all right, that's all I have. So city manager report.
Oh, thanks, Ms. Mayor. I just have like 23 items I need to go over real quick. Just kidding.
I guess I can't ask if you're done yet.
So
This
you
council
sure
doesn't get-
can.
This council doesn't get that.
You sure can. LPC Mayor, I just want to talk about we had the LPC on Monday, which Councilmember Hurst, Mayor, myself attended, as well as Mike Agate. Anyway, just an update in preparation for the upcoming legislative session. The one thing I just want to highlight now is there's going to be some changes to the cooperative wildfire system. That's our kind of our deal with the state, the feds, that we do our amount of work within our city. So we get coverage when there is a potential urban wildfire interface fire, that we're covered and we're not bearing the responsibility of multi-million-dollar fire. So there's going to be some changes. What they're saying is it's not effective. It's the way we're currently doing it is really not protecting our infrastructure, our structures as well as well. So anyway, there's going to be some changes. I don't know what it looks like, but we'll get with Chief Stone there. This is something we need to add to the agenda with the South Davis fire, because they're really the ones who oversee our program. And so we'll get with them. They did discuss the transportation utility fee. There's some again, still some support of not getting engaged and not supporting a transportation utility fee, and maybe not coming forward in this legislative session. I will share that it is on my list of things to do that I would like to discuss actually using. We don't need the transportation utility fee to do this. We can talk about a property tax increase, which does exactly the same thing. What you're not getting is your tax exempt business, organizations participating in that fee. But we already have a mechanism to collect revenue, and that's essentially what Libertas was arguing with their case was you go get a property tax increase. You can't create what their frustration is. Sometimes cities create fees to circumvent the property tax increase. Well, let's have a property tax increase. I think that's a fair. And what that does as a city, again, I don't want to get into the discussion right now. I feel like I am, but it doesn't necessarily say it's dedicated for transportation funding forever and always that a transportation utility fee would do. But you as a council, we can dedicate it to that. But you might have a council 10 years from now who says, you know what, we're spending way too much on transportation. I don't know if that's possible, but we'd like to spend some more in parks. And you have that flexibility. And that's why I'm thinking maybe we have a discussion about property tax increases in that discussion too. So that's on the list. We'll talk about that more, but something's been on my mind. And then I do want to share and go on record that the Briarwood concerns that came up in council today, I will share that staff has spent a considerable amount of time with a couple of residents, a few residents on the street, trying to address their concerns and mediate between the contractor and the resident. Really, these arguments sometimes are between the two, and we can hold them accountable to an extent, but they're really civil discussions, and we've spent some time listening to their concerns and getting engaged. Mike and Mark do a great job, and Dave do a great job trying to mediate and be the middleman to solve those issues. I just want to share we have done quite a bit. Some of the issues that were brought up, we're happy to have that conversation with the general contractor and say it's unacceptable. I will share this general contractor we've used quite frequently in the past.
Okay, that was my only question I had. Was, is this GC going to be blacklisted, or is this like 3 sides to every
We
story?
need to find a way that they pick better subs, ultimately.
Okay.
The GC is great, the subs are potentially the problem.
Because there were some.
I don't
real
want to speak
problems.
slander. I don't know.
General stepping in.
I
and
was
dealing
getting
with the
daily
subs?
Well, that's why I don't
calls
want to get
from
into
over
this discussion. I just will share with you. I don't necessarily want to.
Okay.
Go on.
So it's a
Yeah.
general that we like who hired some bad
Bad
subs.
subs.
I don't even want to go that far on record.
Okay.
I,
Good.
for what it's worth, Brent, when I went out
So-
and visited the,
Yeah.
I can't even remember the name of the street now, but it was Balsam, but it was right next to the Loma Linda Street, and I actually heard similar concerns voiced as the Briarwood Street
Okay.
did. Very similar
Yeah.
concerns. Very similar concerns.
Well, I think Mike and Mark do a really good job, particularly the two of them, trying to get to help. But yeah, there's conversations we need to have, and I have a meeting set up for us to discuss and see. But I'll just share. It's not as if it was deaf ears. There was definitely
No.
some involvement, and I just want to make sure staff, you're where staff is.
Okay.
Trying to do the best we can.
And I was second that because I was talking to staff almost every day too, and they'd already talked to him. So I will
Tell Mark we love him.
We love Mark and we love Mike.
He's not here.
We love Dave.
He was done.
And last,
Bryce.
I just want to share that YouTube was another issue tonight. We really need to figure out our YouTube. It's in and out, but we have the contractors coming in all the time trying to. Anyway, just so you know, so it wasn't live tonight, but we'll get it posted, the recording posted. Just want to make you aware of that.
So when it's not on YouTube, you're recording it on Zoom and then posting it later?
Yeah, that's why the
Okay.
recording started a couple
Yeah.
minutes into the meeting because our YouTube stream wasn't working. So then I started recording it on Zoom.
So yeah, we posted after the fact to make sure it's still.
Thank you for all your efforts.
It'll
Like,
be
She
a
really
couple
is
minutes
awesome.
late. I started the recording.
I
I think
heard
the
it when-
first open session comment was going on. So
yes,
just
I was
missed the
gonna
very
say it got
beginning.
started before anything significant, other than the roll call.
My incredibly profound thought is not on record. I'm just like, I'm
Just
sorry.
repeat it right now.
Yeah, it was repeated multiple times. It is on record. The audio recording.
Yeah, the audio
is
works.
still there. I'm just saying the video on YouTube, which is not technically required, but we do it anyways.
Any questions for me?
No.
Sweet.
Well,
Thank you, man.
thank you, Brent. So, To wrap up, I think that Spencer has a motion to make.
Yeah, just quickly, I want to make a motion. We go to closed session, not to return to the general council meeting with the intent to discuss pending or imminent litigation.
Second.
Okay, motion second. We got to do a roll call vote for this.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
That's unanimous.
Mike should stay around, I think. Sorry, Mike. I know. You're not in trouble, Mike.
Mike Junior. That's his name.
Yeah, I was gonna say, did I just hear Mike?